It's funny how a single moment can change everything, especially when you've poured your heart and soul into something that ultimately feels like a grand betrayal. I've been a dedicated fan of the show Through the Veil since its first season, drawn in by the intricate world building and the intricate relationships between characters. Each week, I'd gather with my small circle of friends, popcorn in hand, eagerly speculating about plot twists and character arcs. The show was more than just a pastime for us, it was a tapestry where our own experiences wove into the complex narratives playing out on our screens. But then came the final season, a season that was supposed to tie up years of storytelling in a satisfying bow. Instead, it felt like the showrunners had taken a megaphone to our cherished theories and shouted, "We don't care." I still remember the day the finale aired, a mix of excitement and dread swelling in my chest. As the hours approached, I could feel the electricity running through our group chat, with everyone sharing their thoughts, their hopes for the characters they had come to love as much as old friends. However, as the credits rolled on what was supposed to be our grand finale, I sat in stunned silence, my friends too, eyes wide. The plot had twisted in the most bewilderingly unsatisfactory manner, characters acted entirely out of character, beloved story arcs were abandoned, and the core relationships that had developed over several seasons were discarded like yesterday's news. It felt personal, like the creators had flipped the bird to all the fans who had invested emotionally and financially in the series. I spent that entire night tossing and turning in bed, the disappointment gnawing at me. Everyone else seemed to shrug it off, chalking it up to artistic freedom, but I couldn't shake the sense of betrayal. I finally decided to write an impassioned letter to the network, pouring my heart out about the discontent amplifying among the fanbase, wondering if they understood the consequences of their choices. Deep down, I knew it was just a show, but as I watched my friends spark up the next day about a different series, a hollow feeling settled in. I had hoped that my voice could spark some change, or at least get a response, but instead, I got silence, and I felt simultaneously mature and ridiculous for having staked a part of my identity on a fictional narrative. The punch to the gut feeling persisted for weeks. One evening, I found myself at a local cafe tucked away from the world, nursing a cup of herbal tea, when I overheard two baristas discussing their own feelings about the episode. They were joking about how they had been let down, but their banter soon spiraled into what those characters could have done differently. I felt an unfamiliar camaraderie. Leaning over, I pitched in with my own thoughts, and soon the conversation grew like wildfire, echoing our group's frustration but freeing me from my solitude. People I had never met were validating my feelings, and it struck me that perhaps I wasn't alone in my disillusionment with the show. I posted on a fan forum, seeking a space to air my grief, and found a chorus of voices just as disappointed. We shared theories that could have salvaged it all, and gradually, the weight of disappointment began to lift as we created our own alternate endings. It became therapeutic. Instead of focusing on the betrayal, we forged new paths for the characters and laughed together about the absurdity of it all. Each day brought fresh creativity, a collection of plot lines that would ironically remind us why we loved the show in the first place. In the end, though Through the Veil stumbled, a community emerged, stronger than any one individual, allowing us all to heal and find joy elsewhere. Reflecting on that time, I realized that sometimes the biggest middle finger to fans is just an opportunity, a prompt to explore why those stories mattered so much and to create new worlds together in their absence. Update: a few months later, I was authentically surprised when the showrunners announced they'd be revisiting the series with a special episode based on fan submissions. My heart raced, the mixture of hope and skepticism washing over me, but this time, I approached it differently. Whatever dark corner the show might lead me down, I could, at least, revel in my creative escape. As I settled into my dimly lit living room, clutching a steaming mug of chamomile tea, I could feel a blend of excitement and trepidation coursing through me. After the initial uproar and disappointment regarding the show's abrupt end, the announcement of a special episode rekindled a flicker of the passion I once felt for the characters I had followed through thick and thin. The past months had seen me diving headfirst into fan fiction, sketching scenes, and reconstructing plots that breathed new life into the narrative universe. Each late-night writing session became a refuge, a place where my frustrations transformed into vibrant tales colored with hope and nostalgia. However, the thought of the showrunners finally acknowledging their fanbase left me second-guessing my feelings. Would they genuinely listen to the voices of those who felt overlooked, or would this be another misstep, a tempting distraction that carried the same bitter aftertaste? The day arrived when we were told to submit our ideas, and the excitement spiraled into a backdrop of anxiety. I poured out my heart into a story that melded my favorite plot lines, reuniting characters who, in my mind, deserved a second chance, a reunion that carried the weight of unfulfilled promises. I let minutia roll off my fingers, building landscapes of gripping emotion and unraveling paths that had left me bewildered. The submission deadline passed like a soothing lullaby, and as I waited, I absorbed every drop of hope and doubt that floated into my thoughts. Days blended together, every ping of my phone sent my heart racing, yet returned only updates from friends speculating about the direction of the episode. Months flew by, and at moments I found myself buried under blankets and memories, ruminating about how I might feel when the episode finally aired. Would my favorite characters retain their essence, or would they fall victim to the very fickleness of storytelling I had tried to escape? The day of the premiere arrived like a potent storm, electric and surreal. I paused for a moment at the entrance of my living room, feeling the weight of nostalgia pressing against my chest. I switched on the television, and the familiar theme song echoed, a haunting reminder of what once captivated me. As I watched, the screen danced with images I had hoped for, my submissions were woven like threads into an intricate tapestry, and I felt immersed in the warmth of a familiar hug. In a peculiar yet satisfying turn, they blended fans' narratives seamlessly with their own, elevating the original story while paying homage to what sparked the love in the first place. Each twist, every dialogue sparked joy within me, igniting childhood dreams that lingered just beneath the surface. In true storytelling fashion, the creators took risks that felt authentic, where humor intertwined with heartbreaking moments. I could feel my heart racing in tandem with the characters' journeys, their growth compelled me, igniting a fierce desire to cheer for them all over again. When the credits rolled, I finally exhaled, realizing I didn't just witness the episode, I had partaken in a celebration of community and creativity, a shared understanding that transcended mere entertainment. It was an articulation of everything I had yearned for, dreams woven collectively, which I thought might only ever exist in my notebooks. In the aftermath, I felt lighter as I tossed around ideas among my friends about potential next chapters for the characters. We laughed and critiqued, built and deconstructed narratives with warmth and intimacy, reclaiming the stories in our own ways. The series, which once felt like a betrayal, transformed into a collaborative playground, each suggestion revealing connections that knitted us closer together. As the days turned into weeks, I embraced those feelings of nostalgia without the suffocating grip of bitterness. Instead, I chose to revel in the journey. Looking back on everything, I realized how a supposed middle finger from creators spawned a rich exploration of passion, friendship, and creativity in reclaiming something profoundly shared. I realized, too, that sometimes the stories we hold dear can slip through our fingers, but are never truly lost. They morph into something new, vibrant, and alive, waiting for us to dive back in, ink new tales on blank pages, and create together, like we did. And with that realization, the darkness that once clouded my vision faded, offering a glimpse of endless possibility. Perhaps we are the architects of our stories, even if they're borrowed from the flicker of a screen or the ink of another's pen. With that realization simmering in my heart, I dove into the fan submission process with a mixture of enthusiasm and trepidation. The online forum had become a whirlwind of creativity, buzzing with ideas that both thrilled and terrified me. I spent hours reading how others interpreted the beloved characters, the settings, and the overarching themes that had captivated us, trying to find that spark within myself while grappling with the weight of expectations. Each submission echoed the pads of 1,000 eager feet, pushing against the gates of our collective nostalgia, and I found myself swept up in the wave of brainstorming sessions with my friends. We would gather in my small apartment, the dim light of string lights casting playful shadows on our faces as we combed through our notes and storyboards. We laughed, cried, and sometimes argued over character arcs and plot twists, but at the end of the night, it didn't matter who was right or wrong. We were creating together, breathing life into the void left behind by the showrunners, who had so abruptly disregarded our efforts. Eventually, I decided to submit a story that centered around a character who had long been a point of contention in the series. Once hailed as the most compelling part of the narrative, her disappearance in the latter seasons left many fans disheartened. It felt like a betrayal to cast aside such a rich and vibrant character, and so I chose to give her a tale of resilience and rediscovery, one where she stumbled upon a forgotten part of the world that held echoes of her past adventures. I could see her standing atop a cliff, reminiscent of the courage she had always shown, gazing out upon a vast horizon. Crafting her journey led me to confront my own feelings of abandonment, to explore what it meant to be loyal to something that seemed to have moved on without us. Weeks passed in a flurry of submissions from fans across the globe, a tapestry woven from the threads of different imaginations. I kept checking the updates on the show's fan page, each announcement stoking the fires of anticipation and anxiety. Finally, the moment arrived, the day they would unveil the chosen fan submissions that would shape the special episode. I sat in my living room, surrounded by crumpled pages and used coffee cups, feeling as if the walls were tightening around me as I waited for the announcement. When the clock struck noon, chills crept up my spine, the live stream began to fill my screen, the familiar logo flashing before my eyes like an old friend I had almost forgotten. As the showrunners shared their gratitude for the outpouring of creativity from fans, my heart pounded anxiously in my chest, each beat a reminder of how vulnerable this experience had made me. They began revealing the titles of the chosen stories, and each name echoed my growing hope, a series of breaths caught in my throat. My fingers tingled with disbelief when the host announced my submission, and for a moment, I felt suspended in time. The world outside faded away, the disgrace of the past replaced by a sense of belonging and validation. I had poured myself into those pages, and now, here I was, about to see my words transformed into a living, breathing segment of a universe that once seemed out of reach. The special episode was set to air a month later, but what lingered longer than the excitement was a profound shift within me. I had realized, through the act of creation, that storytelling possesses an innate power, one that connects people across their myriad experiences and fragmented relationships. I had become part of a community that thrived on shared passion, rebuilding something we loved from the ground up. The day the episode finally aired felt almost ceremonial. I gathered my friends once more, this time transforming my home into an impromptu viewing party, the air thick with anticipation and the scent of popcorn. As the episode unfolded, I watched with bated breath. The familiar score began, and with it, a wave of nostalgia washed over me. My heart swelled as my character emerged on screen, her story intertwining beautifully with the beloved narrative threads that had initially captivated us. It was as if our plans had harmonized with the creator's vision, creating something richer and deeper than any single contribution. I realized then that this moment wasn't about vindication, it was about reconciliation, not just with the creators, but with myself, my journey, and the stories I still carried within. And as I sat there, surrounded by laughter and joy streaming through every corner of my living room, it struck me that every ending leaves a space for new beginnings. The series had re-entered my life, not as a hollowed-out remnant of the past, but as a vibrant pulse that beat among us again. It was a gentle reminder that while stories may wane, their essence never truly fades. In our hands, they can always take flight once more. Update: in the weeks following the episode, an unexpected camaraderie blossomed between the fans, the showrunners, and even the actors who began to engage with us once more on social media. It felt invigorating to share in a collective appreciation, to dissect plot twists and character developments alongside those who once felt like strangers. The show had transformed into a collaborative creation, and, as someone who once felt on the outside, I finally felt at home. Together, we filled the void with renewed passion, with a promise that even when our favorite narratives twist unexpectedly, it's up to us to keep pouring our hearts into new stories, continuing the legacy of something we cherished. In the end, my biggest takeaway? That sometimes, the middle finger turns to a high five, and the stories we love are as much ours as they are the storytellers, ever evolving, ever bright. I almost quit my job today, and it had nothing to do with the relentless paperwork or the beleaguered patients lined up outside the clinic. I'm a nurse practitioner, and my days usually blur together in an endless cycle of exams and prescriptions, but this day felt different, like the calm before a storm. I was looking forward to my afternoon shift, a solid block of time free from the morning rush, just me, the soothing hum of the fluorescent lights, and the comforting scent of antiseptic lingering in the air. That's when Lily walked in. She was around my age, maybe a bit younger, and her vibrant green hair was styled in a chaotic bun that seemed to echo her energy. I'd heard whispers of her around the clinic, the one with the unusual case. For someone who dealt with anxiety and depression, she managed to light up the dreary waiting room with her infectious grin, but it quickly faded when I called her name. There was something haunting lurking in the depths of her eyes, a slight tremor in her hands that didn't match her bright facade. As she settled into the examination room, the atmosphere shifted. I asked the usual questions, how she'd been feeling, any changes in medication, and why she sought help today. Instead of the typical responses, though, she began to tell me about the voices. They were quiet at first, just murmurs that danced at the edge of her hearing. But lately? They'd grown louder, insisting she was being watched by someone rather sinister. My heart sank into my stomach. HIPAA exists for a reason, protecting both patient privacy and our sanity, but as she continued, something tugged on my conscience. She said her family didn't believe her and, much worse, that they had given up on trying to help her. "It's as if they'd rather pretend I don't exist at all," she said, her voice trembling. I couldn't fathom the depth of that pain, the isolation. I could see the flicker of desperation in her eyes, the yearning for validation. I tried to reassure her, encouraging her to seek support from professionals who could offer therapy and possibly medication adjustments, but she insisted that wasn't enough. The voices had sharpened their focus, demanding she prove her existence in a way that threatened her well-being. I felt my heart race as her story unfolded, a pit forming deep within me. It was getting harder to maintain my professionalism. I knew I shouldn't share my thoughts, my personal experiences as a fellow human who'd felt unseen at times, but a voice in my mind urged me to try. "Sometimes, the pressure of feeling invisible can become unbearable," I admitted, keeping my tone steady. "But it's crucial to reach out to those who care for you." She hesitated, her expression riddled with conflicted emotions. "But what if I don't matter to anyone?" she whispered. For a moment, I felt like I had been punched in the gut. Many people felt that way at some point, including myself. I wanted to reach across the space between us, to take her hand and reassure her that she mattered. But I couldn't, not without breaching that invisible line that kept patients and healthcare providers apart. I took a deep breath, the weight of the conversation settling heavily on my shoulders. As she left the room, I felt a mix of relief and dread. I was haunted by her words, her pain, and the burdens I couldn't ease for her. It felt wrong not to do more, to walk away and let someone so desperate wander alone into the world, especially with her fragile mental state. That night, I couldn't shake the experience, replaying her words over and over. I couldn't help but reflect on the strength of connection that often eludes us in our professional roles. I wondered if I had neglected that part of my oath, to care as a human as well as a practitioner. Maybe it was my own past experiences intertwined with her pain, but when I clocked in the next day, I resolved to change my approach. I wanted to find ways to connect my patients with support systems that made them feel valid, to foster a space where they could share openly. Perhaps I couldn't reach out in the fullest sense, but I could certainly lead them to resources that would prove that they mattered. As I worked on crafting a new referral brochure for mental wellness services within the clinic that day, I felt a sense of purpose pulsating within me. And in a way, through focusing on Lily's needs, I began healing some fragments of my own past. If nothing else, I hoped she would find a voice she could trust, a lifeline to bridge the gaps left by those who'd turned away. Months passed, and every so often, I would see Lily's name on the schedule. Each encounter felt like a new chapter. On one visit, I was pleased to see she looked better. The shadows under her eyes had lifted slightly, replaced by a flicker of hope in her voice. "You were right," she said, smiling as she unfolded the complexities of her therapy sessions and newfound support group. "I found my voice. And it turns out, I do matter." In that moment, a warmth spread through my chest, a confirmation that sometimes the smallest acts of reaching out can ignite a change profound enough to alter lives. Lily didn't have to bear her burdens alone anymore, and neither did I. I realized then that being a caregiver wasn't just about the prescriptions or the examinations. Sometimes, it was about sharing pieces of ourselves to help others stitch together their narratives, reminding them that they are not invisible nor expendable. In sharing our stories, we learn to redefine connections and uplift each other beyond the stigmas that might bind us. As I took in these thoughts, I glanced over at Lily, her apprehensive expression softening as she leaned back in the chair, visibly more at ease. The sterile white walls of my office, which usually echoed with the coldness of clinical detachment, seemed to blossom with warmth. There was something powerful unfolding between us, a shared vulnerability that felt like the roots of a plant intertwining beneath the surface, hidden yet vital. Somehow, this realization shifted something within me as well. I was no longer just a healthcare provider, I was both a listener and a participant in an unfolding human experience. However, the day grew darker as I remembered the nagging fears that had haunted me since I became a therapist. My mind wandered back to the unwritten rules of my profession. The protocols of HIPAA, with their stringent regulations, often loomed in the background like a shadow, reminding me that I must tread carefully lest I lose not only my career but also the trust of my patients. What if I stepped over a line with Lily? What if sharing even the slightest piece of my life led to a breach of confidentiality? I was supposed to be the one providing support, not dragging us both into murky waters where boundaries blurred. The anxiety gnawed at me, threading a mixture of elation and trepidation through my chest. To prevent the encroaching worries from spiraling, I redirected the conversation, asking her about her own experiences. A flicker of hesitation crossed her face before she divulged her first encounters with therapy. As she recounted her journey through various milestones, each wrought with its own struggles and victories, a sense of connection deepened. There was an innate comfort in the way our conversation flowed, a gentle give and take that felt as gratifying as it was cathartic. Every shared word knitted our beings closer together, yet in my quieter moments, the toll of my own thoughts lingered like a muted refrain in the background. As the session drew to a close, we exchanged pleasantries, but I sensed an unspoken bond tethered between us, stronger than the unyielding protocols of my profession. Lily had opened up in ways I never anticipated, allowing me to glimpse glorious vulnerabilities within her that reminded me of my own struggles, overwhelming at times, but profoundly human. I made a silent vow to find a way to navigate this connection without falling prey to my own fears. Perhaps, I thought, I could share selectively, using my own experiences to guide but remaining steadfast on the path of professionalism. In the following days, I immersed myself in my work, the rhythm of routine comforting yet occasionally disquieting. Yet, I couldn't shake the memory of that session with Lily. I found myself replaying our conversation over and over, marveling at how two souls braving their respective storms could find solace in shared vulnerabilities. With each passing moment, my initial fears surrounding that session diminished. I felt a resolve taking root. I wanted to work on my boundaries while still holding space for the humanity both Lily and I had uncovered. Finally, I decided that the best way to navigate this delicate situation was not in isolation but together. During our next session, I broached the topic with Lily, underlining the importance of our boundaries yet sharing that vulnerability had proven transformative for both of us. To my relief, she assured me she felt the same sense of community, the relief of companionship. Together, we forged a pact, to be honest about our boundaries while allowing our connections to flourish. The resolution felt simplistic yet significant. It was an unspoken agreement to uphold the integrity of our therapeutic space while celebrating the truth of our shared humanity. With each session that followed, I felt lighter, an odd sense of liberation tethered to my heart. Lily continued to open up in ways that astonished me, and I found myself drawn to her courage, the way she navigated her challenges with such simmering hope. The fear of HIPAA violations dulled in the face of the profound benefits of our connection. It became part of the backdrop of my practice, where I learned to delicately balance my role while still being present, authentic, and, most importantly, human. Reflecting now on that initial trepidation, I feel a newfound appreciation for the journey we've embarked upon, the uncharted waters of vulnerability and the cozy warmth that rises when care meets courage. Amidst the ethical intricacies of my profession, I've found that the essence of caregiving flourishes in honesty, resilience, and shared stories, cementing a beautiful, imperishable bond stretched across what once felt like walls of clinic and distance. After some time, I received a message from Lily. It was brief yet packed with gratitude, a simple, "thank you," expressing how our sessions felt less like a bandage on wounds but rather a seasoned balm for her spirit. I smiled as I read it, my heart lifting again at the thought that we both had navigated this path together, reminding me that sometimes, in the delicate dance of healing, the lines can blur in the most beautiful ways. Life was about bridging gaps, and our bond, though formed in a therapeutic context, had transformed into a cherished connection that I never could have forged alone. And so I realized, in the unpredictable landscape of being a caregiver, it is the humanity we share, the light and shadows, that helps us grow. As I reflected on that turning point between us, I found myself sitting in my small office, a cozy nook piled high with medical textbooks and framed reminders of why I chose this path in the first place. The walls, painted a calming shade of blue, felt more comforting than sterile as they witnessed the evolution of our relationship, a relationship I had once thought was strictly professional now unfolding into something rich and redemptive. I recalled the countless hours I spent with Lily, sifting through her complexities and the layers of stories she carried like old baggage. Each session had been a dance of vulnerability, her heart laid bare against the backdrop of my clinical paperwork and diagnostic goals. I had come to realize that through her own depths of despair, a flicker of resilience shone, and in turn, she was illuminating the way for me, a reminder of the intrinsic connection that binds us all as we navigate our personal labyrinths. But with joy comes uncertainty, and as thrilled as I was to forge this bond, I knew I had to tread carefully. There were boundaries to consider, ethics to uphold, particularly with someone whose path had been riddled with trauma and heartache. I pondered the intricacies of our conversations and wondered how I could continue to support her while avoiding the slippery slope of overreach. Amidst my thoughts, the reality was the challenging nature of navigating a caregiver's role, enhancing lives and offering insights without overstepping that invisible line, one that could easily blur. Soon, our next session arrived, a Wednesday that marked a full month since she had first come to see me. I prepared with mixed emotions, excitement stitched with the shadows of apprehension. As I entered the room, a familiar sight warmed my heart. Lily was already seated, her hands twirling a small silver locket, a talisman of sorts that had clearly become her anchor. "I've been thinking about what you said last time," she began, her voice steady, yet with a softness that carried an underlying vulnerability. "About sharing pieces of ourselves." Her words unfurled like blossoms in spring, our conversation deepened and broadened in ways that felt profound yet so natural. She spoke of benevolent ghosts from her past, former friends who had fallen away, consumed by their own battles, and how their absence left scars she sometimes could not articulate. I listened intently, leaning forward, as time seemed to slip away like sand through fingers. What followed was a gentle volley of stories, her laughter sparking light moments, while the shadows of sorrow lurked just behind the edges, grounding her narrative. A part of me knew that I had to reveal a bit of my own past, a thread of vulnerability to encourage her narrative to grow. I shared tales of my early days in this field, moments of crippling self-doubt when my idealism collided with the stark realities of human pain. I spoke of patients whose stories had etched themselves into the tapestry of my soul, shaping my resolve and orientation. A fierce yet fragile connection blossomed in that exchange, making our struggles feel lighter, almost woven into each other's fabric of experience in a way that transcended clinical boundaries. As weeks drifted on, I felt us move through those uncharted waters, each session filled with dimensions that I had long ago yearned for in this profession, a partnership of healing in its purest form. I was filled with hope, camaraderie, and yet, a tinge of fear. It was the fear of losing her to the world's cruel indifference or the possibility of outing her vulnerabilities to another who would not understand. The emotional weight was palpable, but we thrived in our candid spaces, lifting each other. Sometimes I found it a bit too exhilarating and overwhelming, yet necessary. Then one day, it happened. Lily mentioned her desire to take a step further, exploring creative outlets to channel her feelings. She spoke of wanting to write a blog, to immortalize her battles and stir others who might feel lost. My heart raced, not out of fear, but sheer exhilaration at the thought of her blossoming beyond the confines of our sessions. Yet, the notion struck a dual chord. What if revealing those thoughts to the world puts you at risk? I hesitated. But she countered with a quiet steeliness that took me aback. "It's my story, and I deserve to tell it how I want." And she paused, allowing the weight of her words to settle. It was a moment that whispered volumes, and I felt our roles reverse in that heartbeat. I began to see her not just as a patient in need of care, but as a beacon of strength, reaffirming that healing was a shared journey, bringing us back, full circle, to where we started, the necessity of weaving our lives together into something magnificent. With that revelation, I let go of my fears, recognizing that sometimes a pathway to healing lay in the raw honesty of our experiences. I embarked on encouraging her, offering my support and guidance while she traversed this new creative venture. As she crafted her first post, I felt a rush of gratitude. By helping her navigate the uncharted waters of sharing, I was also embracing my fears and reaffirming my purpose. In that light, I learned and grew right alongside her. And suddenly, the once stern lines of caregiver and patient blurred in the most beautiful, validating way. As days turned to weeks, I watched her transform into a confident storyteller, her words wrapping around other seekers of solace as if crafting a communal blanket in which they could huddle. The small canvas of our original therapeutic room became a vibrant tapestry stitched with lifelike colors reflecting joy and sorrow, laughter and tears. It drew others in, creating bonds of understanding and shared struggles. One day, while uploading her latest blog post, she reached out to me with dazzling excitement. A 2-minute read turned into an avalanche of uplifting responses. It was then that I began to fully grasp the magnitude of our connection. I felt closer to Lily than I had to anyone in a long time, and as the lines of our roles shifted, I found comfort in the dance we had created together. Then, as the seasons changed, so did our meetings. We held space together, celebrated milestones, and cried over setbacks, all part of a story that was still unfolding. Each session became a symphony of shared moments, navigating the unpredictable landscape together, replete with laughter, tears, and the beauty of newfound openness. With each step, I grew more certain in my belief that this journey was reciprocal. We were learners, healers, companions, and in the end, we were simply two souls forging ahead, one day at a time. As I look back on that journey, I remember it as a paradox, a blend of vulnerability wrapped in strength. I thought I would make Lily stronger, but in turn, She helped me reclaim parts of myself that I had buried under the weight of duty and expectation. In embracing her fragility while celebrating her resolve, I became entwined in the very essence of caregiving, a shared spirit where the act of healing became about all of us, far beyond the mere confines of an office. I never once regretted that I hadn't quit. Instead, I found a path not only for her but for myself, and this, I realized, was precisely what I was meant to do. Update: it's been 6 months since I last wrote this account, and I felt compelled to share a final chapter. Lily's blog had taken off. She was invited onto a platform to speak about her experiences, and through it all, her voice, our voice, has become a beacon for others struggling in shadows. Last week, we hosted a community gathering, bringing people together to share their stories face to face in a celebration of resilience. Something magical happened. In seeing the way our paths converged with others, I realized I wasn't just a caregiver, I was a part of something much larger than myself. We weren't alone anymore, and in stepping away from the boundaries I once feared, I learned that being human means opening ourselves up to the tapestry of lives we weave together, brightened by the stories we share. It all began with a simple email that landed in my inbox on a dreary Wednesday morning. The subject line read payroll, important update, and in a moment of both dread and curiosity, I clicked it open. You see, I've never been the kind of person to make a fuss. I work quietly as an accounting clerk in a mid-size firm, diligently toiling away for a paycheck that barely helped me keep my head above water. I'm a 28-year-old woman navigating the world with a tinge of anxiety and a lifelong struggle to pay bills on time, all while wrestling with the looming shadow of student loans that felt more like a hungry beast than an obligation. The email explained that they were implementing a new payroll system, and while I barely glanced at the details, I noticed a mention of bonus adjustments and temporary increases which piqued my interest. I hadn't thought much of it until the following Friday when my paycheck arrived, and reality hit me like a tidal wave. My eyes skimmed over the digits displayed in my online banking app until they came to a complete stop, staring in disbelief. I was overpaid, by a lot. The total was 5 times my usual paycheck, and a wave of excitement washed over me so instantaneously that I found it hard to breathe. Was it a mistake? A windfall? I rushed to my laptop, retracing my steps through the payroll system, but everything seemed to check out. After skimming through the company's online manual on payroll adjustments, I was relieved to find that they had mentioned this would happen. However, the ramifications of keeping this money loomed over my head like an anxious cloud. For the first few days, I couldn't deter the bliss that came with being suddenly affluent. I treated myself to my favorite meals, replaced my sorely lacking wardrobe with outfits that made me feel like a new woman, and even allowed myself a weekend trip to a quaint little cabin by the lakeside where I could finally breathe away from my work. Each indulgence felt bittersweet, a thrilling escape from my grind, tempered with guilt for indulging in what felt like ill-gotten gains. As the weeks passed, I wondered how long I could keep this up. Each paycheck became a new thrill in the world of possibilities. I cleaned my apartment, nurtured plants that previously hung on the brink of life, and took my friends out for drinks that ended with uproarious laughter echoing against the bar walls, their expressions of glee making every decision feel justified. But clouds of dread hovered closely nearby. Thoughts of consequence gnawed at my insides during the quiet moments at night, where I lay restless, the weight of the secret driving a wedge between my high spirits and reality. I convinced myself I had no choice but to keep the facade, that it was too risky to report the glitch. After all, I had never even stepped foot into the town hall of corporate policy. I was there to do my job, not to interpret the rules. All it would take was one slip, one whispered word about my newfound fortune, and I could find myself not only out of a job but embroiled in a terrible situation that I wasn't prepared to navigate. Months passed, I found myself submerged in this intricate web of deceit, mingling pleasure with a hefty splash of paranoia. The anxiety thickened each time payroll day came around, and the thought lingered, gnawing at my thoughts like a mouse in the night. I could feel the ultimatum building, bringing the reality crashing down until one afternoon while sitting at my desk, I was blindsided by an urgent email marked important notice which sent my heart racing. It was a request from HR, calling a company-wide meeting to discuss payroll discrepancies. The words swirled around in my mind like confetti thrown into the air before crashing to the ground as a harsh truth settled in. They knew. They must have confirmed the miscalculations, ran their audits, and deduced I was likely involved. My stomach churned, and I felt the icy grip of despair tighten around my chest. The realization hit me hard. I had grown so used to my false safety blanket of extra funds that I couldn't even begin to imagine relinquishing them now, the very thought terrifying me into frozen paralysis. The day of the meeting arrived with a clarity that I wished I could escape. Standing in front of my colleagues, I felt like an imposter, bound by the walls of my own constructed greed. The HR manager explained the error and expressed their process for rectification, but a strange anticipation filled the room, as eyes darted back to my direction. I wrestled with my emotions, staring down at my clasped hands, feeling that if I let my tongue slip, it would only shatter the already delicate stage we stood upon. In a moment that needed no hesitation, perhaps spurred on by the weight of my debts and my guilt, I decided to come clean. I raised my hand, my voice breaking through a silence that shrouded the department. I think I might have been one of those overpaid. As the murmurs filled the room, I could sense curiosity mixed with disbelief. The HR manager nodded thoughtfully, calling me up in a tone that indicated more than just professional grace. In that instant, an invisible burden lifted off my shoulders, a relief I hadn't known I was seeking. The interview that followed was surprisingly gentle. They asked me questions, assured me things would be sorted, and even nodded when I expressed my genuine confusion about how it all happened. My honesty seemed to be met with kindness, rather than scorn. Days later, after tension smoothed out and the firm welcomed a collective sigh of temporary relief, I found myself hesitantly optimistic. The company worked with me, allowing me to pay back the overpaid balance in manageable deductions taken directly from my subsequent checks. The relief flooded my spirit like the spring rains after a long winter, and in tandem with the trust I'd gained back with my coworkers, I felt grounded. As a quiet reflection, I'd learned a plethora of life lessons in those months, about honesty, about the currency of trust, and about genuinely valuing what I already had. And as for the meeting that had once infused dread into my veins, it turned out to be the turning point where I could not only salvage my job but craft deeper relationships within my workplace. Now, as I close my eyes at night, the weight of secret remorse has settled onto soft pillows of new beginnings, and I find that the true bounty of unexpected fortune lies not in dollars, but in the peace of being was wholly true. Looking back, it wasn't only about the glitch, it was a lesson on what happens when you find yourself standing at the crossroads of opportunity and ethical discovery. If I had a chance to offer anyone a piece of advice, it would be this: sometimes, the hardest confessions yield the sweetest outcomes, tethered to authenticity, which, much like a deep breath, can release the most burdensome of weights. Update: a few months later, after I'd regained my balance at work and developed friends with my colleagues through concrete illusions of trust, I received an unexpected email from my HR manager. Their words acknowledged my honesty and an unanticipated promotion due in part to the integrity I displayed. Life never ceases to entertain a curveball, and this new opportunity was one that I humbly accepted, smiling at the gentle lesson wrapped inside the embrace of everyday existence. When I first read the email from my HR manager, a strange mix of disbelief and elation coursed through me. The promotion was more than just a title bump, it came with a salary increase that, while not nearly as outrageous as the one I had accidentally benefited from during that glitch, was significant enough to make my heart race with possibilities. My fingers trembled slightly as I typed out my response, gratitude spilling from my thoughts onto the screen in a flurry of acknowledgments and excitement. Yet, there was a twinge of unease nestled within my heart, a soft reminder that while I had experienced fortuitous fortune, my colleagues were still working tirelessly, unaware of the inner transitions I'd undergone. When I walked into the office that Monday morning, my usual routine was invigorated by the prospect of my new responsibilities. The air felt charged, almost electric, but with every friendly smile exchanged and casual conversation I engaged in, I couldn't shake the feeling that I owed my team a deeper layer of transparency. The last few months had shaped me tremendously. Honest conversations about ethics and accountability had sparked friendships among my peers. I found myself reveling in camaraderie and shared laughter, the kind that stitched together hearts and minds in a workplace filled with mundane tasks and the occasional coffee break chatter. Yet somewhere in the back of my mind, guilt lingered like a shadow. Could I truly relish this achievement, knowing how it grew from a moment of chaos and moral ambiguity? As the morning faded, I huddled in a conference room for our monthly team meeting, where I listened to my colleagues discuss their struggles, their victories, and everything in between. Their drive inspired me, and as my new role would place me in a position to support them more directly, I felt the need to share my journey, the good, the bad, and the ugly, with the team. At the end of the meeting, as the group wrapped up with a round of thanks and recognition, I cleared my throat, the hesitant silence punctuated by the shifting in chairs. "Hey, everyone," I began, voice slightly wavering. "Before we leave, I wanted to share something with you all. It seems a bit weird maybe, but I think you deserve to know a part of my journey here." The room turned attentive, curiosity swirling in their eyes, and I began to recount my experience with the payroll glitch, the guilt, my honesty, and how it led to my unexpected promotion. I explored my emotions, the fears of judgment battling with my desire to connect and be truthful. When I finished, the room fell silent for a heartbeat that felt like an eternity, but then, one by one, I saw smiles and nods bloom among my colleagues. "Wow, that's brave of you to share," one of them said, their voice warm and inviting. "We appreciate the transparency. It's refreshing." Another chimed in, and soon voices were mingling in a tapestry of support, stories shared, and laughter at the absurdity of life's twists. Through that candid moment, I felt the weight of my earlier guilt lifted, replaced by a profound connection that tethered us together in the shared unpredictability of our paths. The weeks that followed were punctuated by collaborative projects and an exhilarating sense of unity. I became dedicated not only to performing my new duties well but also to creating an environment where honesty was celebrated and shared burdens were lightened. The team flourished, nurturing creativity and innovation. I could finally say I didn't just have a job, I had a family, a tapestry of stories woven together by trust. Reflecting on that period, I savored lessons stitched into my daily actions and interactions around the water cooler gossip and shared lunches. Life truly is a series of beautiful confessions leading to unexpected gifts. Just when I thought I'd hit my peak, I learned the true value is in the relationships we cultivate, tinted with authenticity, humility, and a sense of humor that helps us navigate the bizarre realities that life throws our way. And as I go to bed tonight, I feel a peace knowing that each day is a chance to weave new stories into the fabric of our collective experience, curving gracefully into the unknown. Perhaps that's what life is all about, embracing the glitches, the flaws, and the moments where honesty truly becomes our currency, a continued lasting lesson echoing softly in the chambers of my heart. As I settled into bed that night, the weight of the past few months drifted like autumn leaves, gentle reminders of growth and change. The promotion had been more than an unexpected turn in my career, it seeped into the crevices of my day-to-day life, cultivating a deeper appreciation for my colleagues and the shared spaces we inhabited. I began nurturing friendships that felt like fresh blooms in the garden of my existence, moments filled with laughter over lunch breaks and genuine conversations that spilled into after-work gatherings. I recalled one chilly evening just a few weeks after receiving the promotion, when my coworkers and I gathered at a local bar, the air thick with the scent of spiced cider and the chatter of laughter. We traded stories about insignificant mishaps that turned into hilariously exaggerated tales, like the time I attempted to fix the office printer, only to battle it for what felt like hours, ultimately throwing in the towel to let my supervisor handle it. It was then that I fully realized the important distinction between taking oneself too seriously and weaving humor into the fabric of our everyday struggles. As these friendships blossomed, an unforeseen layer of responsibility accompanied my new role, demanding diligence and a commitment to accountability that at times felt daunting. I was tasked with leading our weekly meetings, bringing new ideas to the table while simultaneously keeping the energy uplifting. On one particularly rainy Thursday, I stood before my colleagues, a mix of nerves and excitement swirling within me. As I delved into the agenda, I noticed one of my new friends, Sarah, leaned back in her chair with this mischievous grin. In that moment, I took a breath, recalling the previous turmoil I'd endured, and slipped into the comfort of authenticity that had served me well in the past. I turned the meeting into a collage of brainstorming, encouraging everyone to toss wild imaginaries into the bowl, and with every idea tossed about, it felt as if we weren't just colleagues anymore, we were a chorus, blending our distinct harmonies into a melody of creativity. However, not long after, an interesting dilemma nudged at the corners of my happiness. Rumors swirled through the office about impending layoffs that left many in a cloud of anxiety. It was gut-wrenching to watch as stress drained the light from our vibrant discussions, replacing it with somber whispers. I couldn't ignore the creeping sense of dread that accompanied these conversations, and soon found myself in the break room, cooking up an idea to diffuse the tension. With a heart full of hope, I organized a day of gratitude, inviting everyone to share things they appreciated about their roles, whether it was the comfort of our shared coffee mugs, a favorite project, or even an early Friday wrap-up, the simplest joys that framed our work life. That day unfolded like a soft unfurling cocoon, as laughter replaced anxiety. As the room filled with genuine appreciation for one another, I felt the intertwining threads of community tighten around us, forming an unyielding bond against the uncertainty that loomed outside. In this peculiar patchwork of existence, I also confronted the inevitable feeling of vulnerability that lay in expressing gratitude. I learned just how important it was to acknowledge our fears and challenges, but alongside them, the shimmering possibilities that friendship and camaraderie could nurture. Reflecting on this experience as I settled back into bed that night, a glimmer of realization poked through my usual snuggles of comfort. Life, in its erratic brilliance, had brought about transformations not just in my career, but in the heart of who I was becoming. I smiled at the echoing lesson. Embracing uncertainty became far easier when shared with a circle of laughter and warmth. And as the time dripped away into the stillness of the night, I understood that the essence of my journey hinged on this idea: by owning our stories, glitches and all, we weave ourselves into the bigger tapestry of existence, healing within every shared confession and uplifting each other through every curveball life throws our way. Every Friday, as twilight began to drape its velvet shadow over my town, I found myself slipping into an abandoned version of our world, a realm I had only begun to understand. My name is Sarah, and at 32, I was navigating the messy waters of adulthood with the grace of a swan on ice. I had a job I loved as a graphic designer, a small but cozy apartment, and a close-knit group of friends who would gather over wine and laughter every weekend. Yet beneath the surface of my seemingly idyllic life simmered a strange phenomenon. Every Friday, with the onset of night, I stumbled into this alternate reality where everything felt both eerily familiar and paradoxically different. It started innocuously enough, just the usual urge to take a solitary walk to clear my mind after a hectic week. One evening, I meandered through the park, where the scent of damp earth filled the air and streetlights flickered like stars awakening, when I felt a sudden chill dance along my spine. That was the moment everything changed, as I found myself staring down an alleyway I had never noticed before. The air grew thick and heavy as I stepped inside, and what unfolded felt like a scene from a long-forgotten dream. It was a fractured mirror of our world. Skyscrapers leaned unnaturally, their windows shattered, and the streets were littered with remnants of a bustling life that once thrived. The silence was almost deafening, punctuated only by a soft whisper of wind that seemed to carry the echoes of laughter and conversations long lost. Each week, I wandered deeper, meeting shadows that mirrored my own life, shapes of people I recognized but were stuck in time. There was Jason, my ex-boyfriend, sitting forlornly on a park bench with an unreadable expression, and my childhood friend Lily, trapped in a loop of tying her shoelaces, eyes glazed and unseeing. It was agonizingly beautiful and heartbreakingly tragic all at once. Even though a part of me wanted to shake them awake, to remind them they were part of a world that moved forward, I felt an inexplicable bond with them, a sense of shared longing for what had been lost. Every encounter brought more questions than answers, and a knot of guilt lodged itself in my chest. Was I abandoning these versions of my friends? I found comfort in the stillness they provided, a stark contrast to the chaos of life outside this broken reality, yet it was a bittersweet solace. The emotions tangled within me, weaving a fabric of unresolved feelings I had yet to confront. Driven by a mix of curiosity and a need for closure, I questioned my own reality. Was I merely a spectator in this parallel existence, or had I become an unwilling participant in the decay of what used to be? After weeks of wandering, something extraordinary happened. One Friday, as the sun dipped below the horizon, swallowing the remnants of daylight, I found myself holding the hand of past Sarah, a version of me caught in a moment of vulnerability, crying over the remnants of lost dreams. In that moment, I realized she wasn't merely a reflection, she was a part of me, and her pain was my pain, an echo of my fears and regrets. I squeezed her hand tight, and a warmth surged between us, an understanding that we were allowed to feel all of it, the joy, the sorrow, the unfinished stories. I took a breath, exhaling the weight of expectations, and whispered promises of resilience, coaxing her to step into the light of possibility. When the dawn broke, pulling me back to my own world, I carried that moment with me. I understood now what this strange journey had been about. It wasn't just about fleeing into shadows but confronting what lay within. The following Fridays came and went, and with them, I chose to embrace both the hazy memories and the bright future waiting for me. I sought therapy, started journaling again, and reached out to the people I had neglected, rebuilding those connections with renewed vigor and honesty. In reflection, every weekend became an opportunity to grow, to heal, and to evolve. I never saw that abandoned world again, but perhaps it existed in the whispers of my mind, urging me to confront the echoes I had long kept at bay. It was strange but liberating. There was no need to return to a world that was never mine to mend. Life persisted, with its beautiful messiness, and I was ready to embrace it all anew. Update: a few months later, after harnessing my newfound sense of hope and strength, I invited my friends over for a gathering. I shared my experiences with them, how fear and joy intertwined in our lives, how we each carried shadows of past selves within us. To my surprise, they opened up too, revealing their struggles, the dreams that slipped away, the relationships that faded. We laughed and cried together, transforming what could have been an ordinary evening into something profoundly beautiful. In that moment, I realized that while my journeys into the abandoned world were over, the true exploration of life had only just begun. The warmth of our shared stories lingered in the air long after my friends left that evening, their laughter echoing in the silent corners of my home like a comforting blanket. I sat among the remnants of our gathering, the empty glasses, the discarded pizza boxes, the faint smell of burnt candle wax, and let the realization of our newfound connection wash over me. It struck me how easy it was to get lost in the grind of everyday life, focusing on the mundane tasks and brushing aside our emotional landscapes as if they were clutter. But that night, we had revealed our vulnerabilities, we peeled back the layers we wore for the world, showing glimpses of the pain and passion that simmered beneath. It was a cathartic release for all of us, a pact to keep our hearts open, no matter how scarred they may have been. As the days went by, I found myself seeking the presence of my friends more often, each gathering becoming a ritual of sorts, small fires of connection. Against the chill of life's uncertainties. We shared coffee before work, late-night walks under stars that appeared more vivid than ever, and even those awkward moments of silence that spoke volumes about our growing trust. The abandoned world where I once escaped felt increasingly distant, a fading echo of solitude in contrast to the vibrant tapestry we were weaving together. Yet, sometimes, an unfamiliar shadow would brush against my thoughts, a faint reminder of the solitude I once found comforting. One Friday night, as I prepared for another gathering, the air thick with anticipation, I glanced out of my window and spotted a figure in the distance. An overwhelming sense of déjà vu washed over me. I recognized the silhouette from my previous encounters within that parallel realm. It stood still amidst the swirling wind, a tangible piece of my past resurrected in the real world, its presence unsettling yet oddly magnetic. My heart began to race with a mixture of fear and disquiet. Had my journeys truly ended, or did the abandoned world still seep into my reality? I pushed the thought aside and joined my friends, our conversations flowing like an unbroken river, laughter bubbling through the thick evening air, but the figure lurked in the corner of my mind, demanding attention. It became an unwelcome guest at our feast, lingering there, causing my smile to falter and my laughter to sound hollow at times. As the night carried on and my friends' stories unfurled, I fought to focus, yet every time I glanced outside, there it was, steadfast and unyielding. That following night, sleep evaded me like a wary wild animal, and I found myself staring out into the dark. Something compelled me, an insatiable thirst to confront whatever ghost of my past was anchored in the shadows. I slipped out of my house, leaving behind the warmth of camaraderie, unsettling excitement coursing through me. As I approached the figure, I felt a magnetic pull drawing me closer, despite the nagging fear that crept into my thoughts, the urgency to uncover the truth wrapped around me like a scarf on a cold winter night. When I finally stood before it, the figure morphed into an ethereal version of myself, an echo from the abandoned world, draped in garments that seemed woven from air and despair. "You left me behind," it whispered, the voice unfamiliar yet intimately familiar, echoing the unresolved parts of my spirit. The words dug deep, but instead of fear, a wave of recognition washed over me. "I didn't leave you, I transformed," I replied, my voice steady despite the shivering uncertainty in my heart. We stood there, two halves of the same story, the weight of everything unspoken suspended in the air like a thick fog. "You can't run from what you've been," the phantom self cautioned, "but you can accept it." The truth nestled within me at that moment. No longer was I that figure trapped in desolation. I understood now that both aspects of myself were valid, not separate but interconnected, each yearning for recognition and acceptance. With a newfound resolve, I stepped forward, embracing the other me, feeling the cold slip away and warmth fill the air between us. "I understand you," I murmured, "and I won't forget you." It had all led to this nexus, this moment of convergence of past and present. The figure shimmered before me and gradually began to dissolve like mist at dawn. In that transformative moment, I realized that our struggles didn't define us but rather enriched our existence. They interwove into the fabric of who we were and who we were becoming. When I returned home, I sensed a profound stillness around me. I slid back into bed, cradled by the quiet, the echoes of our gathering still mingling with my thoughts, now clearer and brighter. Each relationship, each struggle, each laugh shared had not just been an escape from the abandoned world but a pilgrimage toward wholeness and acceptance. As I drifted off to sleep, I understood that my journey had only just begun, the threads of connection promising the warmth of love, hope, and understanding in a world both expansive and beautifully intimate. Update: a week later, I received an unexpected message from one of my friends, who revealed that after our last gathering, they had decided to pursue a passion they had long abandoned. Through our conversations, they realized how much they had been missing out on by burying their dreams. They were taking steps to reclaim their life, inspired by that evening's vulnerability. I felt an overwhelming tide of gratitude, knowing that the parallels of our lives would continue to entwine in unexpected ways, far beyond what I had initially imagined. Each Friday now carried a promise, a chance to expand our worlds together, simultaneously exploring the depths of our pasts while forging paths into a brighter future. As the weeks passed, our Friday gatherings became something I eagerly awaited, a soft beacon amid the tumult of everyday life. Each meeting transformed into a safe harbor where we could shed our masks, nurturing a bond that felt both fragile and resilient at the same time. We shared stories of progress and setbacks, each tale echoing with laughter or laced with the bittersweet recognition of our past regrets. I watched my friends dive headfirst into their passions. Clara picked up painting again, her once dormant creativity swirling back to life in vibrant hues, while Jake, a former musician, dusted off his guitar, the strings quivering in anticipation as he strummed melodies that had long been silenced. On one damp Friday evening, as a gentle rain tapped on the windows, we gathered in my living room, sipping tea and wrapped in the warmth of our camaraderie. The air was thick with shared ambitions and relentless hopes, and as the rain pattered softly against the glass, Clara stood up, her hands shaking slightly as she held a newly completed painting.
I painted this for all of you, she announced, her voice
vulnerable yet steady. We turned our attention, and I felt breathless as the canvas came into view, alive with swirling colors that seemed to dance in harmony. In the center of the piece stood a radiant sun, the golden rays extending outward, touching smaller images woven into the fabric of the painting, notes from a musical score, vibrant flowers in an untamed garden, and silhouetted figures embracing beneath the sky. Each element echoed our shared stories, bringing the impossible together in a dazzling display of possibility. My heart swelled as Clara shared the inspiration behind her painting, revealing it to be a tribute to our newfound resolve, a reminder that life, much like her art, was a blend of light and shadow. Each story, each contribution, tied into the greater tapestry of who we were becoming, a poignant reflection of our intertwined journey. But underneath the laughter and paint, there lurked an unspoken undercurrent. I could feel it creeping into our gatherings like the fog that sometimes settled in the valley, a lingering fear that perhaps this sense of rebirth was all too fragile, that the momentum we'd built might slip through our fingers like grains of sand. So, that night, as we wrapped up our discussions and prepared to bid each other farewell amid hugs and promises to return, I decided to let my anxious thoughts spill out. What if this all goes away? I asked, the weight of apprehension evident in my voice. What if we lose this spark? Silence enveloped the room, a collective breath held tight, until Jake broke it, his expression earnest. But what if we don't? What if we just make it a part of our lives, weave it into everything we do? It's worth the risk, isn't it? His words resonated within me, filling the space with an understanding that while the fear of change was a valid one, the courage to embrace it was something we all shared now. Our paths would not always be straight, and we would face obstacles ahead, but we had each other, the threads of our stories now woven together in ways that felt indelible. In the weeks that followed, we established a routine, a cycle of inspiration that pushed us beyond mere discussion. Clara organized a mini art show displaying her work inspired by our gatherings, and Jake penned lyrics for a song that captured the emotional essence of our shared journey. I struggled, too, dipping my toes into writing for the first time, words spilling onto the page as I explored the shadows I once thought were too dark to face. We became a collective of dreams, a sounding board for support, where failure became a learning tool rather than a conclusion. Yet, each Friday, there was still the nagging thought in the back of my mind, would this last? What would happen when life interjected and we found ourselves distanced again? One night, amid songs and artwork, Clara shared something that shook the very core of my worry. She reminded us that our relationships, those threads that connected us, might stretch, but they would never break. The vulnerability we had forged would allow our paths to remain intertwined, even during hard times. I pondered her words deeply as the weeks rolled by, the thoughts spinning like a top in my mind as I observed the changes in all of us. While life wasn't linear, perhaps the connections we built could guide us through its winding paths. Then, one crisp evening, as the trees outside began to shed their leaves in a vivid mosaic of color, so too did we shed our old selves, admitting the depth of our fears and joys. With every shared meal, every laugh, and the tears that sometimes fell freely, we started to understand that vulnerability was not a weakness but a wellspring of strength. By trusting each other with our truths, we created an unassailable support network, each of us vowing to cling tightly to the hope that had begun to unfurl within. As autumn painted our town in shades of rust and gold, I no longer feared that the world we had built would crumble. Instead, I welcomed it with an open heart, understanding that the beauty of our bond lay not just in what we shared, but in the promise of becoming, of growing and changing together. As I looked around our circle, illuminated by the warm glow of soft candlelight, I felt a calmness settle over me. The Fridays were no longer a way to escape into the past, they had grown into a celebration of our present and the radiant future we were all learning to embrace. And as I let out a soft breath, the words of our lives merging into one symphony of resilience echoed in my mind. This was only the beginning. Update, as a final note, I want to share something unexpected that emerged as we continued this journey together. Jake approached me last Friday, excitement shimmering in his eyes, and revealed that he had been writing pieces not just for himself, but for a new collaboration. He mentioned that he was planning to form a band, pulling Clara and me into the mix. The idea of sharing our stories through music and art on an even larger stage frightened me, but looking at the smiles of Clara and Jake ignited something within me, a spark of possibility. So here we are, a week later. I've agreed to join them, taking on the challenge of writing lyrics alongside Jake. The fear remains, but now, more than ever, I recognize the importance of stepping out of my comfort zone. I am ready to explore life's mysteries, both on that canvas and in those melodies. I breathe a little deeper as I consider what lies ahead, whatever it may be. I know it will be an adventure worth sharing, as we continue to shape our own beautiful, abandoned world together. It was a humid summer evening, the kind that clung to your skin with its heat and filled the air with a sense of restless energy that made everything feel a little more alive. My friends and I had gathered in Aaron's dimly lit basement, the kind of place we felt safe in, safely tucked away from the world, where secrets and laughter echoed off the concrete walls. We were all entering our junior year of high school, and for the first time since middle school, we felt grown up enough for a night of truth or dare, with all the bravado and mischief that seemed to come with it. The atmosphere was electric, fueled by the dim glow of fairy lights strung across the ceiling and the hum of our excitement. I sat cross-legged on the worn-out carpet with Liz and Tyler to my right and Tim on my left, my heart racing, caught up in the thrill of the night, uncertainty bubbling to the surface with each round. The dares began innocently enough. Tim had to text his crush a cringe-worthy pickup line, while Liz found herself balancing a spoon on her nose. But as the night wore on and the drinks flowed a little too freely, the dares escalated. That's when Ariel, the often quiet but fiercely intelligent girl who usually sat on the fringes of our group, surprised us all with her growing confidence. She challenged Aaron, who was always the jokester, to kiss the girl he found the least attractive in the room. Everyone can vouch for how ridiculous that was. We all knew his longtime crush was Katie, who wasn't even here. But instead of backing down, Aaron shot a mischievous grin and declared he'd do it. With barely a moment's hesitation, he leaned in and planted a quick kiss on my cheek. The room fell silent, and it felt like the air had been sucked out of us. I could feel my face flush, a mix of shock and something else fluttering in my stomach, and I froze. They all erupted in laughter, but my laughter was hollow, a shell around a growing anxiety that twisted in my gut. I didn't expect the heat of embarrassment to turn into something deeply unsettling as he casually brushed it off and returned to his place among the crowd. A wave of unease rolled through me as the night continued, my friends cycling through more ridiculous dares while I sat fidgeting, trying to shake off the warmth that still lingered on my skin. My mind raced, caught in this internal war. Part of me wanted to dismiss it as a prank while another part was helplessly fascinated by the fleeting intimacy of the moment. That's when Ariel turned to me, visibly picking up on my discomfort. "Hey, are you okay?" she asked softly, her brows knitted with concern. It was a simple question, yet loaded with meaning in a room where honesty was a fleeting currency. I shrugged, forcing a smile, but something in her gaze compelled me to admit more. I didn't expect that. It felt. I don't know. I trailed off, desperately searching for the right words to express how a seemingly innocent dare had spiraled into a tangled web of emotions. Ariel nodded, and I could see she understood in a way I didn't expect. The night wore on, but my mind lingered on that moment. The game fizzled out as people grew weary, and eventually, we found ourselves sprawled on the basement floor, half-heartedly engaged in conversation. As the clock ticked toward midnight, I gathered enough courage to voice my discomfort to the group, hoping to lighten the tension that sat heavily in the air. I mentioned how that dare had stirred up feelings I didn't quite know how to handle, and as I spoke, I saw relief wash over Ariel's face. She must have sensed my need for validation, and when I finished rambling, she was quick to back me up, sharing her own feelings of discomfort over Aaron's boldness. Surprisingly, that shared experience opened a door between us. The others leaned in, listening intently. The laughter that previously filled the room morphed into a collective rumble of understanding, as everyone began to admit to their own moments of awkwardness during the game. I could see Aaron's smile falter, and for the first time that night, I witnessed genuine recognition of his thoughtlessness. Maybe it was the alcohol or just the moment, but feelings of camaraderie flooded our conversation, wrapping us all in its embrace. Some truths were spoken, some dares forgotten, but we connected that night on a deeper level than I ever anticipated. As we left Aaron's house, the night air was cool against my flushed cheeks, and the laughter echoed in my mind, a reminder that even in discomfort, there is a chance for clarity and understanding. Reflecting on it all, I realized that sometimes it takes a moment of absurdity to bring a group a little closer, to allow vulnerability to glitter beneath the surface. A few weeks later, when I saw Ariel again in English class, I noted a wave of reassurance as we exchanged knowing smiles, a small reminder of how that one chaotic game had shifted something within our circle. It had made me think about friendship and honesty in a new light. As I drifted to sleep that night, my heart felt lighter, knowing I wasn't alone in navigating these strange, growing feelings of adolescence. Ariel and I had forged an unlikely bond over a silly dare that taught us both something profound about ourselves and each other. It wasn't just another game, it was a pivotal moment in our lives that bridged into deeper connections and understanding. Anyone bold enough to kiss beneath the veil of a simple dare unknowingly opens the door to vast exploration of emotions, and sometimes that's all it takes for true friendship to flourish. Days passed, and the sun dipped lower on the horizon, casting an orange glow across the quiet suburban streets that felt both comforting and foreign at the same time. The laughter from our last game of truth or dare echoed in my mind like a favorite song, but it wasn't just the thrill of the game that lingered, it was the sensation of Ariel's lips brushing against mine, a fleeting moment that had somehow changed everything. I found myself looking forward to school again, not for the classes, but for the moments shared between us. It was in the cafeteria where Ariel and I sat together every day after that. Her laughter rang clear and bright, almost as if it had a life of its own. We talked about everything, our favorite books, the pressure of grades, and the silly crushes we had. But beneath the surface, a subtle shift was happening. The air seemed charged with anticipation, with unspoken words hanging heavily between us. During a particularly playful lunch, Ariel dared me to serenade her in front of our friends, and before I could think, I stood up, clearing my throat. With a mix of embarrassment and excitement, I improvised a silly love song that drew giggles from the group, but as I looked into her eyes, my heart raced, not just from the dares themselves but from how deeply I was beginning to care for her. That day, as we walked home, I couldn't shake the feeling that what had started as a game was growing into something wonderful, something complicated. Yet, with every shared laugh and every moment spent in her warm presence, doubts crept in. What if I misread the signals? What if, in trying to pursue this uncharted territory, I put our friendship at risk? Perhaps I should keep my feelings buried deep like one of those secrets you whisper into the softest corners of your mind. The turning point arrived on a Friday evening when a group of us gathered for another round of truth or dare. This time, it was different. There was an undercurrent of tension as whispers and teasing glances circulated. I found myself caught between wanting to participate and wanting to protect what I had with Ariel. When it was my turn, I took a breath, eyes darting toward Ariel's reassuring smile, and I chose dare, hoping it might push the boundaries of our friendship just a little further. I dare you to call your biggest crush and confess your feelings. A friend blurted out, and the air thickened instantly. My heart sank, the dare echoed in my mind, reshaping my thoughts into a whirlpool of panic. My biggest crush was right in front of me, sitting just inches away, yet the idea of saying it aloud paralyzed me. Glancing at Ariel, my throat tightened. The group urged me on, the pressure swelling in my chest. I didn't want to make a fool of myself or ruin what we had, but what if this was an opportunity to clarify everything? With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone, dialing without giving it one more thought. I could hear the ringing in my ears as Ariel shot me a questioning look, her eyes a mixture of support and confusion. Finally, a voice answered, fuzzy through my nerves. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my tone light, but all I could think about was Ariel's expectant gaze. I stumbled through the first few lines, but then as we reached an awkward silence, something shifted inside me. Actually, I said, "You know what? I think I just made a mistake. Because there's someone I really like, and I think I should tell her. So, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and do it." I hung up, adrenaline pumping through my veins, and before I could collect myself, I turned to Ariel, whose mouth hung open in shock. I meant you," I blurted, the words tumbling out faster than I could catch them. The room went quiet, and finally, the silence broke, my friends stifling giggles while maintaining their conspiratorial whispers. Ariel's cheeks flushed a deep crimson, but her expression softened, confusion melting into understanding. I could feel my heart pounding against my ribcage, the weight of the moment pressing down on my shoulders. Time froze as we locked eyes, and suddenly it felt as if the walls around us had melted away, leaving just the two of us suspended in a cosmic bubble of anticipation. "Really?" she whispered, almost as if she were afraid to shatter the fragile canvas of this new reality. For a moment, I considered retreating, to erase my impulsive confession before it could lead to something bad, but instead, I found courage stirring within me. "Yeah, really," I replied, allowing my vulnerability to bridge the defining gap between us, where friendship and something deeper could meet. The air shifted, her nervous smile turned into a beaming one, and suddenly, the tension that had borne itself in that moment began to dissolve. We both laughed, the kind of laugh that radiates warmth, locking away uncertainty and cultivating a newfound depth to our relationship. That evening didn't end in a single dare, it spiraled into a torrent of honest conversations, dreams shared beneath the stars, and the unguarded joy of finally discovering connection. It changed the way we saw each other, not as just friends daring each other, but as two people brave enough to step beyond conventional boundaries, daring to embrace what lay ahead. In the weeks that followed, we navigated the delicate and uncharted territory of being more than friends, connecting not only through playful dares but genuine vulnerability in our interactions. Every stolen glance and nervous touch sent shivers through me, and gradually, the boundary that once defined our friendship melted away into something exquisite and gleaming. Ariel and I became partners in more than just games, we became partners in exploring the intricacies of young love, challenging ourselves to embrace what it meant to uncover intimacy while carrying the sweetness of youth on our shoulders. As the days turned into weeks, I realized that we had ventured beyond those initial trembling steps into a world rich with laughter, support, and understanding, teaching us both that every friendship has the potential to grow and evolve in the most unexpected ways, as long as we have the courage to dare. In retrospect, that game of truth or dare hadn't merely been a game, it became a transformative catalyst for our lives, pushing the edges of our hearts until they opened wide, inviting in the warmth of trust and affection. And just like that, we were no longer just players in a game, but co-authors of a tender story that was only just beginning. The weeks that followed that fateful night were nothing short of a whirlwind. The gravity of our dare had subtly shifted the dynamics of our group, and what was once a carefree circle of friends blossomed into something deeper and more intricate. Every Friday, we gathered at the old tree in my backyard, now a sanctuary of laughter and secrets. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting golden hues that danced through the branches, making the world feel like a secret haven. I could feel the change in the air, as conversations faded into soft smiles and longing glances exchanged between Ariel and me. It wasn't overt, but rather an unspoken agreement that lingered just beneath the surface. My heart was a patched quilt of excitement and anxiety as I started to wonder what it meant for us to redefine our friendship, to cross the boundaries laid out by childish innocence. One evening, with soft twilight surrounding us, Ariel dared me to share a secret, her tone playful but her eyes searching. My thoughts raced. It would have been easy to share something inconsequential, a quirky habit or an embarrassing moment, but the worry still lodged in my throat that our friendship would change irrevocably made me hesitate. Was I ready to lay my heart bare? Finally, I decided on the secret I had kept tucked away. I confessed how that kiss had shifted something inside me. The confession sprung forth timidly, as if it were a small bird breaking free from a cage. Ariel blinked slowly, absorbing my words, and a tender silence wrapped around us like a warm blanket. I held my breath, waiting for her response. After what felt like an eternity, her smile broke into the kind of radiance that filled the space between us with warmth. "I feel the same way," she replied, her voice a soft whisper caught in the evening breeze. Those simple words transformed the air around us, filling it with a sweet heaviness. A mix of relief and exhilaration engulfed me, and suddenly, the tremors of my previous doubts seemed trivial against the vastness of our connection. We moved closer, our shoulders brushing, creating a spark that ignited behind my ribs. The laughter of our friends in the distance faded, giving way to a cocoon of intimacy that felt both thrilling and terrifying. That night marked a pivot in our friendship. We began to confide in each other more, sharing dreams and fears over quiet conversations beneath the stars. In those moments of vulnerability, I discovered layers of Ariel I had never known, the way her eyes lit up when she spoke about her dreams of being a photographer, how she wrestled with self-doubt, and how she found solace in nature's quiet embrace. Life was starting to unveil its complexities, each layer revealing deeper shades of understanding and admiration. However, with the beauty of blossoming feelings also came complications. As the pressure of our new dynamic settled in, I worried with each passing day, what if this bond, so fragile and precious, fractured under the weight of expectations? I watched as our friends, including Jake and Lily, began to notice the subtle shift, their taunts and playful nudges serving as jarring reminders of our transformation. Each time they jokingly nudged us together, claiming we were dating, a prickle of anxiety shot through me. Were we ready for that? One Friday evening, our group took a spontaneous trip to a local carnival, filled with laughter and tangled threads of joy. The air was saturated with the aroma of cotton candy and popcorn, a nostalgic scent I could hardly resist. As we walked through the throngs of people, my heart raced not just from the excitement of the carnival atmosphere but from the undeniable tension bubbling under the surface between Ariel and me. That night, the game we played took on a life of its own. It was no longer about childish dares but about truths we were unprepared to face amidst the laughter. After riding the Ferris wheel, we ended up in a quiet corner away from the jubilant crowd, and Luna, ever the instigator, suggested a game of truth or dare. I could sense the exhilaration dancing in the group as if everyone was holding their breath, unsure of what was to come. When it was my turn, I chose truth, contemplating whether to confront my emotions or cloak them in the comfort of playfulness. I could feel Ariel's gaze on me, searching, as if she, too, were taking stock of what was happening. "Do you have feelings for anyone in this group?" Jake asked, his eyes darting mischievously between us, igniting the familiar tension swirling around our little gang. Time seemed to stretch like taffy, and all the air left my chest. Struggling to breathe, I glanced at Ariel. The secret of our burgeoning feelings loomed over us like a dark cloud, and my heart raced at the thought of confessing what lay hidden beneath the surface. Looking into her eyes, I felt a sudden surge of courage. "Yes," I replied, my voice steady as I held her gaze. "I do." Ariel's breath caught, her eyes widening with surprise tinted with familiarity. The room buzzed with excitement and intrigue, yet it was as if the world around us faded into the background. "And who might that be?" Tara pressed eagerly. "I can't believe it's not me," she joked, but her laughter felt distant. "The truth is," I said, allowing the honesty of the moment to unfurl, "it's Ariel." The shock that settled in the air rippled through the circle, gasps escaping lips and laughter slightly fading as the weight of my confession danced across the charged atmosphere. Ariel's cheeks flushed a delicate shade of pink, and she searched my face for any sign of jest but instead found sincerity gleaming in my gaze. There, in the thick fog of uncertainty, our bond felt palpable, stepping from the shadows into a vibrant light, much like the emerging dawn. To my surprise, Ariel didn't shy away. Instead, she grinned, laughter bubbling up as if a wall of tension had dissolved between us. "I guess we're both in trouble then," she said, her smile wide, plunging us both into a newfound exhilaration that wove its way through our friends. As the last remnants of summer spilled into our lives, we navigated this fresh landscape of connection, our hearts dancing in harmony as we balanced between the playful thrill of the dare and the profound truth of our feelings. The carnival faded into memory, replaced by sleepy afternoons and quiet evenings wrapped in warmth, where we dared to venture further into each other's lives, sharing moments of sweetness, uncertainty, and a sprinkle of inevitable doubt. Months went by, a tender rhythm established beneath the guise of friendship, but as with any journey through uncharted territory, complications began to arise. I've learned that emotions aren't always kind. They can twist into something complicated, gnawing at confidence. We still played our games, but each dare felt heavy with expectation, our flirting becoming a tender dance on seemingly fragile ground. The fear of losing what we had made me hesitant, challenging me to balance what we wanted against the foundation we built. Then came an evening when I couldn't put it off any longer. Ariel and I found ourselves finally alone on the old tree swing, swaying slightly, reflecting on the shared laughter of the past few months. I turned to her, breathless. "What are we doing?" My voice broke softly against the stillness, and she met my gaze with an expression shimmering with understanding. "We're daring ourselves to be vulnerable," Ariel replied, her voice steady yet soft. We talked deep into the night, the stars shimmering above us, and it occurred to me, what began as simply a dare had evolved into something courageous and necessary. We had traversed the tender intricacies of friendship and intimacy, learning to embrace the duality of being both creators and caretakers of our story. In that moment, I wasn't afraid anymore. I wanted the story to continue, with all its complications and beauty, an intricate tapestry woven from our laughter, caution, and daring love. It was neither a clear-cut beginning nor a resolute ending, it was simply the unfolding of what we had dared to explore. Friendship matters, especially when it fosters love, and as dawn broke on the horizon that night, I felt an invigorating rush of certainty. Whatever came next, we would face it together, hand in hand, open to the wild and wonderful journey that lay ahead. And so, as I laid my head down that night, a smile lingered on my lips, breathing warmth into my dreams, knowing whatever shadows danced at the edges of our story would only serve to deepen the bond we had forged, the bond seated in a silly dare that had blossomed into a beautiful connection, as real and tender as we dared to believe it could be. In recent months, a strange sense of unease has settled in like a thick fog over my small suburban town, wrapping around the familiar streets and houses, suffocating the vibrant spirit we all once took for granted. I suppose I've always considered myself a typical American, blissfully navigating through life with a steady job at the local library, sharing coffee breaks with my fellow workers, and spending weekends stargazing in my backyard with my son, Ethan. But now, as I find myself scrolling through online discussions on platforms like Reddit, I can't help but wonder, how does it truly feel to be American these days? It started with simple conversations with friends, who seemed more reclusive than usual, avoiding discussions that led into anything resembling politics or current events. But then came the day when Ethan approached me, his young brow furrowed, asking, "Mom, why are so many people arguing and fighting on the internet?" His innocent question hit me like a punch to the gut, and I mentally scrambled for an answer that would reassure him. You see, I didn't have an immediate response. All I could muster were vague remarks about differing opinions and the complexities of the world. As the days went by, I noticed the tension amongst the community growing. People would look past each other in the grocery store, the air thick with a palpable sense of frustration, and even the town's annual fall festival felt muted, as though joy had taken a backseat. I often sat on my porch, watching neighbors walk their dogs, and imagined sharing a friendly chat, yet it seemed like an impossible task to breach the uncomfortable distance that had formed between us. Then one evening, as I was stirring up a pot of chili, the doorbell rang. It was Mrs. Henderson from next door, her face creased with worry. She asked if we could talk, and I've never seen her look so vulnerable. As we sat on the front steps, she revealed how scared she felt for her grandchildren, growing up in a world that seemed increasingly divided and hostile. It stirred something in me, a delicate yearning for connection amidst chaos, and without thinking, I confessed my own worries about Ethan, sharing my uncertainty about how to explain the complexities that surrounded us. To my surprise, she responded with a softness that I had almost forgotten existed, and what started as a somber conversation about the state of the world slowly transformed into a cathartic sharing of hopes, fears, and our shared belief in raising a kinder, more empathetic generation. Over the next few weeks, we founded a small weekly gathering in our backyards, inviting other parents, feeling the warmth of camaraderie blossom where once there was trepidation. Each meeting offered us a chance to express our concerns, share our joys, and it felt as if we were knitting a safety net out of laughter and camaraderie. As the seasons changed and we transitioned into winter, we exchanged stories under the street lamp's soft glow, occasionally touching upon our thoughts about the country and the constraints we felt entwined in. That sense of community was reflected in the spirit of each gathering. Among the laughter and shared snacks, we gradually built the courage to discuss, listen, and understand each other, igniting flickers of hope in our hearts. I found comfort in knowing I wasn't alone in navigating this tangled web. Instead, we were hand in hand, illuminating each other's paths. With time, I realized that being American had shifted significantly for me, not in a grand, political way, but on a more intimate, personal level. In seeking connection during turbulent times, I had embraced a sense of belonging that made me proud despite the chaos outside our doors. I often reflect on that initial worry Ethan expressed, knowing it ignited a series of fortifying conversations that transformed our little town. As we gathered around warm lights and shared pies, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude wash over me. Perhaps all it required was vulnerability and openness to rebuild our sense of community. So, how does it feel to be American these days? It feels like leaning into the discomfort, fostering connections, and believing in the shared humanity that binds us, despite the discord swirling around us. It's not perfect, and the journey is ongoing, but I've come to learn that togetherness, even amid uncertainty, can pave a path towards healing. Update: just last week, we had our regular gathering and asked everyone if they wanted to keep meeting, even after the holidays. Our conversation was filled with excitement, and we decided to start a community project where we write letters to local lawmakers about our hopes for the future, inviting our children to participate. The response was overwhelming. Who would have thought that a little chili and some honest conversations could evolve into such a collective purpose? Looking back, I see that this experience not only helped to mend the rifts in our community but also rekindled faith in the possibility of change, one small bond at a time. As we embarked on this new journey of engagement, I often found myself in the company of friends who were once mere acquaintances, and each gathering felt like a gentle tug on the frayed edges of my heart. The project soon transformed into a monthly affair, a sanctuary where voices that had long been hushed could finally speak out. Our letters became vessels of hope and dreams, carrying the weight of our children's futures along with our own aspirations. I remember the first time we gathered to write together. The air was thick with anticipation and warmth, a poignant reminder that shared spaces could replace walls. We sat around folding tables under the soft glow of string lights, the smell of fresh coffee mingling with the crisp scent of paper and ink. Children laughed and played nearby, occasionally sneaking glances at their parents, curiosity sparkling in their eyes like stars just before dusk. As I helped my son spell out his thoughts on education, life lessons chin deep in youthful wisdom, I felt something shift within me, a nostalgic warmth growing in the pit of my stomach. There was a beauty in the banality of it all. As we shared stories about our daily lives, the burdens of our individual struggles felt lighter, turned into fleeting whispers between friends. Each letter we penned took on a life of its own, a story of resilience wrapped in the inked hopes of a community eager to be heard. We began sending our letters not just to lawmakers, but to local newspapers, transforming our words into a symphony of resolve and solidarity. Slowly but surely, our group started finding its voice, an echo of thought that resonated far beyond our suburban corner. There were moments of doubt, of course, conversations about the intricacies of social change and the daunting nature of governmental responses made us question our impact. Would our words even matter? But with each passing month, responses from lawmakers began pouring in, each letter sparking a flicker of hope that urged us forward. One particularly chilly evening, we received a response that still brings goosebumps to my arms. It was from a state senator, acknowledging our letters, commending our efforts, and inviting us to a community forum to discuss our ideas further. I could hardly breathe as I read it aloud to the group, faces lighting up with an electrifying mix of disbelief and excitement. Our meetings became not just a hub for discussion but a safe harbor, a place for unfiltered honesty where parents could voice fears about the rising costs of living, and children could dream of safer schools and brighter futures. It was cathartic, to put it mildly. There was a sense of purpose that had eluded many of us for years. By engaging with our lawmakers and pushing for change, we were igniting a passion for advocacy within our kids, teaching them that democracy was not a distant concept but a tool within their reach. As the end of the year approached, we held a holiday gathering that felt less like a project meeting and more like a warm family reunion. We decorated the community center room with handmade ornaments, each one a testament to the unique hopes and dreams of local families. Laughter and joy filled the air, a stark contrast to the noise of division that once echoed throughout our neighborhood. The culmination of our efforts, a special letter addressed to the entire community, was displayed prominently on the main bulletin board, a beautifully penned summary of the ideals we stood for and an invitation for others to join us. When I stepped back to observe the smiles spreading across so many familiar faces, the laughter of children echoing like the sweetest harmonies, I realized how far we had come. In channeling a desire for better, we had stumbled into an unexpected camaraderie, forging relationships that challenged our preconceived notions and quietly reshaped our worldview. I didn't just see neighbors anymore, I saw friends, allies in a journey that sought something greater than ourselves. Months passed, and with each communication we exchanged, I felt lighter. I had wrestled with the notion that being American in this climate felt isolating, a relentless tide of division pulling us apart. Yet, in creating this project, I had discovered slices of hope rooted in unity and shared purpose. We might not solve all the world's problems overnight, but we had fostered a sense of belonging and possibility in a way that I hadn't realized I needed. Reflecting back, I now understood that being American today was not just about grappling with the headlines or the chaos that often filled our screens. It was about connecting with those around us, sharing our aspirations, and standing together for what we believed in. I found solace in community, the belief that change could be cultivated in small moments, like taking the time to listen, to reach out, and to warm a neighbor's heart over a pot of chili. So, as the seasons turned and our project continued to flourish, I welcomed each new day with an open heart and a mind eager to listen, grateful that sometimes it is in the collective that we find our individual strength. Update: just a few weeks after our final gathering of the year, the senator invited our group to the state capitol. It was a surreal experience, sitting in a large conference room surrounded by those once deemed unreachable. We presented our letters, our hopes, and our children's dreams. The room was charged with a palpable energy, one that urged us onward into uncharted territory. As we left, the weight of responsibility settled comfortably on my shoulders, replacing the burden of isolation I had carried for so long. It felt as if we weren't just faces in the crowd anymore, we were part of something larger, a movement fueled by unwavering belief in our ability to instigate meaningful change. Who knows what paths lie ahead or what stories remain to be written, but I am learning to embrace each moment, knowing that the journey often begins with a simple act of connection and a shared bowl of chili. As the weeks turned into months, each meeting brought more people and more stories to our gathering. We began to see familiar faces, those of the baker from down the street, the retired teacher who once ran the local after-school program, and even the barista from the cafe where I used to grab my morning coffee in isolation. The warmth of our little coalition created an inviting space that felt like home. We established a rhythm. Each session began with the aromatic scent of chili simmering on the stove, vegetarian for those who preferred it, and transformed into an informal think tank where ideas flowed as freely as laughter. I discovered that sharing our individual stories over a warm meal could illuminate the common threads woven through our lives, revealing shared hopes, fears, and dreams. One evening, a young mother named Sarah brought her daughter, a bright-eyed girl with wild curly hair, who approached me with wide eyes, curious. "Why are you all writing letters?" she asked innocently, clutching a crayon in her tiny fist. That question lingered in my mind long after the evening ended. Her simple curiosity reminded me of the impact we were having not just on each other, but on a generation that stood to inherit our future. So, we decided to invite children to contribute their thoughts as well, incorporating a segment where they could draw or write about their hopes and dreams for the community. Each week, the role of our project expanded. The letters we penned soon adorned the walls of the local government office, becoming a collection of voices, and when they received responses, they were read aloud with pride, each reply igniting sparks of hope within us. This entire process transformed not just our community, but me personally. Gone was the uncertainty I once felt. In its place grew a newfound sense of purpose that was both invigorating and humbling. However, it wasn't all smooth sailing. As we became more visible, we also became subjects of scrutiny. Some in the community disapproved of us channeling our grievances and pleading for change publicly, arguing that we were merely stirring up trouble. We faced backlash from some who believed our efforts contradicted the established way of life, and a few called us naive dreamers, unable to see how deeply entrenched problems were. It wasn't easy to hear harsh comments and judgment from those who used to share our space. Feelings of resignation would often sneak in at night when I found myself alone, wondering if our efforts could really redirect the course of our local narrative. But every time I felt the weight of doubt creeping in, I'd remind myself of Sarah's question and our group's diverse collection of letters and drawings. They became my anchor. I learned to channel that anxiety into pushing harder, leaning into the discomfort and turning it into a conversation rather than conflict. To my surprise, some of those who had initially criticized began to join our discussions, more curious than combative. There was a palpable shift towards understanding, and the ties that once felt fragile began to mend. Eventually, we organized a community event called A Day for Tomorrow, which showcased the letters in a public exhibit, bringing together art, music, and collaboration. Families filled the park, bright colors of happiness around each booth. Kids colored with crayons, each drawing adding bursts of life to the drab, gray spaces that had grown all too familiar. When the sun dipped low in the sky, it cast a warm glow over our gathering, and I felt a profound sense of hope wash over me. That evening, as I sat on the grass, listening to the giddy laughter mixed with hopeful chatter, I understood that the journey wouldn't be over after one event. Our story was unfolding in chapters, each page filled with community, compassion, and connection. Reflecting on this experience now, I hold a profound gratitude for those early chilly conversations that started it all. What began as a simple gathering transformed into a lifeline for many of us. We all learned that embracing change doesn't demand grand gestures but can spring from shared meals, laughter, and understanding. As we continued to write letters and draw dreams for the future, I felt a quiet strength, a collective pulse, propelling us forward. Yes, Being American in these times can feel isolating and frustrating, but it is also filled with possibilities forged in the fires of connection, clarity, and community. I've come to realize that every bond we create, no matter how small, moves us one step closer to a better tomorrow, encouraging each of us to ask not just how it feels, but how we can actively shape the narrative together. And as life often does, it nudged us along, never letting us stay stagnant for too long. As I'd sit pondering how much had changed, I realized I was no longer carrying a weight but rather a flame, igniting others along the way. As we continued sharing our dreams, who knows how far this flame could travel. It was just another late night scrolling through Reddit when I stumbled across the thread that would change everything. Ask Reddit, what are your thoughts on a Reddit-wide ban of X links? The post sparked a debate that ignited something deep within me, intertwining my own life with the virtual chaos of the comments section. My name is Charlie, and like many, I had considered Reddit my refuge, a place where I could hide from the anxieties of daily life. At that moment, though, I was navigating a personal storm. You see, my best friend, Sam, had become obsessed with a specific self-help subreddit that peddled dubious life hacks and questionable motivational quotes. I had seen him spiral deeper into these threads, losing touch with the real world around him. The advice was not only impractical, it blurred the line between inspiration and delusion, and Sam had started to believe every word. I felt like the lone survivor in a sinking ship while everyone around me, including him, jumped overboard for half-formed ideas that only left them floundering. My concern transformed into an internal conflict that crept up on me, whispering questions I was too afraid to voice. Should I intervene? Would it damage our friendship if I called out his fascination with this unyielding stream of pseudoscience? I could envision myself approaching him, a trembling figure trying to pierce through the dense fog of his newfound faith in the absurd. Each day bled into the next, my heart caught in a loop of empathy and frustration as I watched him drift farther away from the person I had known. It wasn't just his obsession. It was how it began to tarnish our connection. Texts went unanswered, our gaming nights cancelled. I felt like a ghost, haunting the remnants of a friendship that was rapidly fading. I wondered if anyone else felt what I was feeling, if any of these Redditors had the same sinking sensation as they typed their opinions, each keystroke echoing with a mix of reasoning and desperation that matched my own chaotic thoughts. Then came the night that everything boiled over. I dropped by unannounced, hoping to break through the barrier he had built around himself. When I walked into his room, it was a shrine to these self-help articles, walls plastered with quotes that floated tentatively on the surface of his reality, mocking our childhood dreams of adventure and inspiration. I stood there, a spectator in my own friend's life, until the wave of disappointment washed over me and crashed into words. Sam, this stuff isn't helping you. You're acting like you've found the magic potion to happiness, but I can't watch you drown in it. You're losing yourself. The silence that followed felt eternal. A chasm carved out by every unread message and every void he had created by immersing himself in the threads of empty promises. The look in his eyes was a mixture of surprise, anger, and something that resembled the fading glimmer of understanding. My heart raced as I prepared for conflict. I only hoped he could see the friendship behind my words, rather than just the accusation. I wanted our bond intact, yet I knew that sometimes, voicing your fears brings clarity, even at the risk of rupture. To my surprise, he didn't lash out. Instead, after a long pause that felt like a spine-tingling eternity, he let out a breath I didn't know he was holding. I guess I didn't recognize it until now. He confessed that he felt lost among the noise of countless suggestions. Our conversation meandered slowly, layers of our friendship peeling back to reveal the insecurities and fears that shaped us both. The tension eased, and I felt a flicker of hope as he began to recognize that the community he had wrapped himself in didn't have the roadmap he needed. Over the next few weeks, we designed a plan together, an amalgamation of our own dreams and the wisdom we had learned through navigating stormy seas in the real world. We started with modest goals and allowed each other the grace to try and fail. As Sam and I began carving new paths together, I watched the sinister grip of that obsessive subreddit ease its hold over him. With each setback, conversations became raw yet enlightening, weaving back the threads of companionship that made our bond stronger. It was a journey of rediscovery through shared vulnerability, a reminder of the importance of real interactions over the churning tides of an online community. Looking back, I can't help but feel thankful for that thread, for the way it pushed me to address my worries. Sometimes it takes a catalyst to kickstart the slow journey back to clarity, whether in life or in friendships. I also made a note to follow the ongoing discussion because I realized that we're all navigating our own unique challenges, even those we can't see. Fast forward several months, and Sam is thriving, taking intrinsic steps fueled not by misguided life hacks but by genuine connections and shared experiences. As for me, I learned that sometimes, love and honesty walk hand in hand, leading us to significant change in those we hold dear. I still scroll through Reddit late at night, but now the screen feels a little more alive, much like my friendship with Sam. Sometimes I wonder how many others are waiting for a nudge, and I hope they find the strength to speak up, just as I did. Perhaps in every online debate, there's a little piece of life waiting to be unraveled, stitched together with the threads of compassion. And those are the moments worth savoring. It was just another evening, the kind where the sun dipped low in a sky bruised with shades of orange and pink, casting a soft glow through my window as I settled down with my laptop. The familiarity of the warm light enveloped me, kindled by the comfort of my worn-out favorite blanket. I opened Reddit, my usual sanctuary, the place where countless stories waited to be unearthed. As I scrolled, I happened upon a post that caught my eye. Ask Reddit, what are your thoughts on a Reddit-wide ban of X links? I could almost envision the heated debates already brewing, a digital tempest tucked away within the screens of frustrated and passionate commenters. I could feel the same pull that drew me to Sam that day, the desire to spark conversation and tease out the complexities hidden within seemingly simple questions. Reading through the flurry of responses, I found myself immersed in various perspectives, some people pleading for change, arguing against an oversaturation of a specific disreputable link type, while others embodied the quintessential Reddit spirit of rebellion, insisting that freedom of expression should trump the inconvenience of filtering out the noise. The debate felt visceral and vital, echoing the very conversations I had with Sam when he opened up to me about his struggles. It made me reflect deeply on our small circle dynamics in a larger digital landscape. As I began typing my own comment, I noticed a thread that spoke about the weight of online presence and how not everyone felt valued within these expansive communities. It made me think of Sam again, and how our talks had unearthed layers of vulnerability tucked away behind his laid-back demeanor. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I paused, contemplating how my words might resonate with someone who needed them just as I had needed Sam's honesty. I recounted my experiences of feeling lost in a sea of opinions and how it often took a single nudge to recognize the importance of speaking up, a reminder that every virtual voice had the potential to amplify someone's reality. I felt a surge of purpose, realizing that even while wrapped snugly within the digital ether, there existed a sacred connection among us all, a web of humanity transcending screens and avatars. As I hit post, I sighed, feeling a mix of nervousness and relief. Would my words spark reflection, perhaps even inspire someone to courageously confront a hidden truth? I returned to scrolling, my heart beating gently in tandem with the rhythm of familiar comments and discussions. Hours passed like slow-moving clouds, and yet it felt as if each moment wove another thread into the fabric of my night. When fatigue began to set in, I scrolled to the top of the thread one final time, pausing at my original comment. It was alive, buried beneath a cascade of new replies. To my surprise, a series of thoughtful reflections unfurled in response to my simple nudge, a ripple effect echoing the very change I celebrated with Sam. People were sharing their own experiences, confessing to moments of doubt where they'd felt overlooked, or admitting they had long shelved their thoughts because they were afraid of being banned from discussions altogether. Suddenly, I felt less like a spectator and more like a participant in an ongoing dialogue. It was in those moments that I realized there was tremendous power in the mundane swap of hypothetical questions and shared traumas that unfolded in forums like these. 12 new notifications chimed, and I opened them one by one, feeling this gentle warmth swelling within me like the cozy embrace of my blanket. Every response revealed another story, another life that had shifted in some way, shaped by connection and understanding, even strangers acknowledging shared fears, laughter shared over memes, or heartfelt apologies raining down in the wake of misunderstandings. As I finally prepared to close my laptop, a comment stood apart, resonating deep within me. Thank you for reminding me I am not alone. I've been afraid to share my opinion on X because I didn't think anyone would care. It felt like a small victory in a vast sea of anonymity, to know that perhaps my words had found a home in someone's heart. A soft smile crept across my face as realization settled in that this digital space could be an oasis from the world's coldness, a realm where compassion thrived, just like the companionship I had found with Sam. Slipping into bed, I let the day's conversations weave into my dreams, and I thought of how often we confine ourselves within imaginary barriers while the universe pulses around us, inviting us to let go and embrace the voices that dance in the shared air. It occurred to me that sometimes, love and honesty could extend beyond our immediate circles, reaching out through the vastness of the internet, waiting patiently for those brave enough to grasp them. Yes, it was a lovely evening after all, both in the digital realm and in my soul, and as I drifted off, I held on to the hope that tomorrow might bring another story worth telling, reminding me anew of the power of our connections, wherever they may live. The next day, I found myself wandering through the familiar threads of my favorite subreddits, my heart slightly lighter than it had been before. There was something comforting about diving into the stories of strangers, each post radiating a raw vulnerability that could resonate with the loneliest of souls. I clicked on a thread titled "What are your thoughts on a Reddit-wide ban of X links?" Instead of the usual memes and snarky comments, the replies were a tapestry of experiences showing just how intertwined our lives could be. People were discussing issues related to the controversial links, which often led to discussions about relationships, trust, and the very essence of sharing our experiences online. One user, who I later learned was named Hannah, shared a heartfelt confession about a past betrayal that had occurred because of one such link. Her story struck a chord in me. She wrote about a friend who had shared a private moment publicly, and how it shattered their trust beyond repair. As I read through her narrative, I felt her pain, a visceral ache that I remembered too well from my own experiences with Sam. The comments turned into a collective therapy session, each new reply revealing layers of hurt and healing. People began to share their own stories of loss and redemption, and as the thread blossomed, so did my understanding of how intricate and fragile our digital connections were. With each response, it became increasingly clear how our interactions shape not just our online lives but our real-world ones too. I felt a tug at my heart when Hannah updated her post to share that she had reached out to her friend after years of silence. She was ready to embrace the vulnerability of forgiveness. In that moment, I realized that perhaps those threads, the ones filled with debates and discussions, were not just pixels on a screen but lifelines connecting us to the essence of what it means to be human. They were invitations to explore deeper themes of empathy, understanding, and the complexity of relationships. Late that night, as I snuggled deeper under my blanket, I had the sensation of unveiling hidden threads of compassion and resilience. Beneath the surface of online discussions, there was a current of connectedness, providing warmth in the cold anonymity of the internet. It felt like I was tapping into something much larger, a shared humanity woven through our stories. My mind drifted back to my friendship with Sam and how our candid conversation had nurtured a garden of trust where none had stood before. I hoped that somehow, I could be the nudge for someone else, just as you might find that flickering light in a dim room. The idea filled me with a tranquil sense of purpose, and I drifted off to sleep once more, eager for what morning might unfold in this ever-evolving dialogue of life and connections. The next morning, I woke up with a peculiar sense of urgency, driven by the desire to share the power of honesty and compassion. I penned down my thoughts about the previous night's thread, capturing the spirit of understanding that flowed through the comments where Hannah had bravely laid bare her heart. I titled my post, "Sometimes, Healing Comes from Unexpected Places." I wrote not just to share my experience, but to remind the world that our voices matter, that even in our vulnerability, we hold the keys to connection and healing. A flood of responses came in, the kind that reinforced my belief in the goodness of our collective spirit. Many users poured their hearts out, sharing experiences of estrangement, reconciliation, and the various shades of love that had shaped their lives. I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude wash over me as I read through the heartfelt messages. There was a comment from a user named Mark that caught my eye. "I've been so scared to talk to my sister after what happened between us. I think I'll finally reach out. Thank you for this." At that moment, I realized this little act of sharing might have a ripple effect, nudging someone toward courage, just like my connection with Sam had. Later in the day, I received a direct message from Hannah, thanking me for my post. She told me she had sat down with her friend, and they had both ended up crying over coffee, airing the grievances that had festered for far too long, and began to mend what they thought was irreparably broken. It struck me how interconnected our lives truly were, threads weaving through one another, forming patterns of sorrow and joy. Each interaction, every reply, was a whispered invitation to open up, to engage, and ultimately, to heal. For the first time in a long while, the universe felt like it was affirming my existence, holding up a mirror to reflect the shared stories and triumphs over adversity. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I took a moment to reflect on how far we'd all come, in our little corners of the internet and within the overlaps of our lives. It dawned on me that no matter how daunting the world could seem, we had the power to bring light to dark places, share warmth in cold corners, and cultivate understanding from vulnerability. Maybe every post was a chance for connection, a potential to stir something deep within the hearts of others. The universe was still out there, waiting to be embraced, and as I tucked into bed that night, I couldn't help but smile softly, thinking of all the stories yet to unfold, the lives yet to touch, and the love that would ripple far beyond what I could see. I held close the hope that tomorrow might again bring forth another connection threaded with compassion, another invitation to lean into our shared humanity, and perhaps even a few more moments worth savoring. I carry pumpkin seeds in my pocket and plant them everywhere I go. I've been doing this for over 20 years. It started innocently enough on a late autumn afternoon when I was wandering through my grandmother's garden, her breathy laugh dancing with the wind as she taught me how to cultivate the earth. She handed me a small handful of pumpkin seeds, each one a promise of future harvests, and said something that stuck with me: everything you plant has the power to change the world, however small. I didn't think much of it at the time, but as the seasons passed, that simple notion began to nourish my growing fascination with seeds, the cycles of life, and the hidden beauty of nurturing potential in unlikely places. Whenever I found myself in a new city or town, I would pause when I felt that familiar stirring in my heart, an urge to plant. It was never about pumpkins, really. It was about legacy, connection, and perhaps a poorly buried grief that thought I could never nurture something as beautiful as my grandmother once did. I wanted to remind the world that little things can grow into something remarkable. I wanted my grandmother's spirit to linger through those tender sprouts. As the years rolled on, I turned into something of an urban legend among my closest friends, like the mystical gardener planting life where it seemed to have none. My pocket always brimmed with tiny seeds, ready at a moment's whim. The sound of someone cursing a barren landscape would find me surreptitiously dropping a few seeds in that neglected plot of land, or softly pressing them into the dirt beside a crumbling sidewalk. I found joy in imagining the tiny plants breaking through the cement, whispering their defiance, and offering hope to strangers passing by. But a peculiar shift appeared when I stumbled upon my usual spot along a forgotten park bench one cold evening. I often took my time to plant a few seeds here, watching the way children would laugh and play nearby, and being enveloped in that comforting ambience of life unfurling around me. This time, however, I noticed a figure lingering at the edge of the trees, a woman with sharp eyes that seemed to hypnotize even the bravest of stars. I felt a twinge of unease. She didn't seem to notice the jovial laughter or the laughter of children. She merely stood, blinking slowly as if weighing the world from a distance. Curiosity got the better of me, and I approached her, introducing myself with the confidence that only comes from years of believing in something. She listened, but her gaze flicked not to me, but to my hand, the hand that held the seeds tightly like a secret. "You shouldn't be planting seeds here," she said, her voice layered with an underlying imperceptible frustration. I was taken aback. Who was this stranger to question my life's mission? But there was a peculiar gravity in her voice, a sense that she understood something I did not. Despite feeling hurt, I wanted to understand her reasoning, so I asked her why not. And with an intensity that felt like a storm cloud gathering in the distance, she warned me that not all seeds are meant to take root. Some spaces are dormant for a reason, cursed perhaps by sorrow or tragedy. I was confused. Surely my grandmother's legacy couldn't disrupt the delicate balance of the world. Yet, somewhere deep in my heart, her warning lodged itself like a splinter. Days turned into weeks, and though my pocket remained heavy with unplanted seeds, I couldn't shake off that unsettling feeling. Other whispers began to creep in, mostly from friends who casually mentioned odd occurrences tied to previously nurtured patches. Flowers withered too soon, plants grew with unnatural shapes, and urban myths of a spectral gardener emerged. The story spoke of lurking shadows that appeared in gardens where I had planted my seeds, stories that echoed with memories I hoped were long buried. I wrestled with my thoughts, feeling both the ache of loyalty to my grandmother's tradition and the twinge of guilt with every seed I pocketed but never planted, battling against the storm of whether to continue or cease this ritual connecting me to her. Finally, one rainy evening, I returned to the park, carried by memories both joyful and morose, and that woman was waiting beside the bench, her expression revealing nothing but the lines of concern etched across her brow. Without a word, I drew the few remaining seeds from my pocket, palms outstretched as if surrendering to the unseeable force around us. Plant them, but not here. Let them go into the world where they might find better ground. A sense of relief washed over me, unexpected and soft as the pouring rain embraced the earth, and I fled from that park, knowing I'd have to seek new territories, new sanctuaries to honor the promise I once made. As the years flowed, I became a traveler in search of places where every seed could thrive, planting not just for my grandmother, but for a world that might need a little extra color in its palette. Now, with every blossoming pumpkin I come across, I think of that conversation often, reflecting on how simple intentions can manifest into something beyond our understanding. Sometimes, when I return to those familiar locations, I smile at what they have become. They still bloom with exaggerated vigor, and some, surprisingly, flourish in the most unlikely terrains. Occasionally, I still feel the weight of guilt tug me toward a memory I can't quite reach, but as my fingers touch the seed packets I carry, I remember that it is okay to let some things go, to plant them in the ever-stretching possibilities of the world. I stand at the edge of each new destination, ready to find better soil, knowing that every tiny legacy I craft can yield unexpected blooms in the hearts of others. Update: recently, while wandering through a farmer's market, I encountered a woman, laughing with her children as they gathered pumpkins from a cellar. I felt a strange connection and approached her. When she turned, her eyes sparkled with familiarity, making my heart race. It was her, the woman from that fateful evening. We talked, laughed together, sharing stories of growth, both of plants and family. I realized then that perhaps planting those seeds had led me to her, creating connections that transcended space and time, and reminding me that even in the darkness of doubt, new beginnings could sprout in the most unexpected ways. As we continued to talk, I felt warmth spreading through me, not just from the sun shining overhead, but from the joy of genuine connection. Her name was Clara, and she spoke with a gentle enthusiasm that reminded me of a soft breeze rustling through autumn leaves. She told me about her garden, how it had become a sanctuary for her and her children, a place where laughter intertwined with the scent of earth and flowers. Each tale she shared reminded me of the myriad of seeds I had scattered over the years, each a tiny anchor to different moments, emotions, and places. I felt a flicker of pride. Each pumpkin seed I had planted was my silent rebellion against the void, my way of nurturing life when my own felt so unmoored. We exchanged stories about our respective lives, my heart fluttering with the thrill of the unexpected, yet this familiar feeling lingering in the corners of my mind as if Clara and I had shared a memory long lost to time. The conversations danced effortlessly, filled with warmth, as if two old friends were catching up after a lifetime apart. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky with strokes of orange and purple, I couldn't help but wonder if planting those pumpkin seeds had somehow returned this lost piece of my own story back to me. Time slipped away, and when the market began to wind down, I felt an inexplicable urge to share my secret, the secret that had shaped the past 2 decades of my life. Amidst the shuffle of people packing up their fruits and vegetables, I glanced down at the small tin I kept in my pocket. It was filled with pumpkin seeds, my little carriers of hope. Taking a deep breath, I confessed to Clara about my habit of planting these seeds everywhere I visited. To my surprise, she didn't recoil or laugh. Instead, she leaned in closer, her eyes lighting up with curiosity and understanding. "You're spreading life," she remarked softly, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "That's beautiful." Her acceptance melted away any lingering hesitation within me, and for a moment, I felt lighter than I had in years. We parted ways under the twilight sky, exchanging numbers, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter, born from the act of sowing seeds, was destined. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself looking forward to our conversations, each message a promise of laughter and connection. I shared with Clara some of the stories tied to the different places I had scattered my seeds, the old oak tree at the park where I spent hours pondering life, the abandoned lot where colors from wildflowers peeked through cracks, and the quiet beach where I had walked alone during storms of doubt. Clara listened intently, sharing her own tales, and together we discovered that with every seed, there was a story waiting to grow. One evening, as we were chatting, I mentioned how I once planted a pumpkin seed at a crossroads, a literal crossroads, when I felt lost in life. Clara paused, her expression turning thoughtful. "You know," she said, "it's funny. I used to feel so lost at that same crossroads, but I think I found myself again the day I chose to create my garden. It was then that I realized the true magic of the seeds I'd carried all these years. They were never just about planting pumpkins, they were about the connections they formed, the memories cultivated in the soil of my life, and the friendships nurtured despite the passage of time." That simple act of spreading seeds translated into hope, leading me to Clara, someone who saw the world through a lens of beauty and growth, just like I did. As our relationship blossomed into something more profound than I could have envisioned, I felt a twinge of guilt creep in. While I was overjoyed at the newfound bond, I couldn't help but worry about the weight of my secret. I feared that revealing the full extent of my obsessive planning might tarnish our connection. Yet, as clumsy as it was, I felt an inevitable pull towards honesty, towards laying bare the parts of me that had been shaped by both joy and sorrow. One evening, over a cup of tea that Clara had brewed with her children's help, I finally shared my fears, how my association with the seeds often blurred the lines between joy and grief for me. Clara listened, allowing my words to settle like dust in the soft light of her cozy kitchen, before gently assuring me that we all carry our own seeds of pain and hope. In the following months, I watched as our friendship flourished, evolving into something even more enriching than I had expected. Together, we decided to create a community garden, inviting others to share their stories and plant their seeds, be it real pumpkin seeds or the metaphorical seeds of hopes, dreams, and healing. As we tilled the soil together, laughter surrounding us like the aroma of fresh earth, I realized that those seeds I had carried in my pockets for over 2 decades had not only been about growing pumpkins but about cultivating a garden of connections and shared experiences, where life flourished in unexpected ways. The garden became a haven for the neighborhood, a place where toiling hands came together, nurturing their personal journeys while embracing the beauty of community. Now, years later, as I look around at the vibrant blooms and bustling laughter that echo in the garden, I feel a profound sense of gratitude. The seeds I planted in moments of loneliness had woven a tapestry of stories, friendships, and love, intertwining with Clara's life and so many others, reminding me that the smallest acts can have immeasurable impacts on our paths. The lesson I learned through all this is that sometimes, we must spill a few seeds into the unknown to watch as hope and connection take root, finding their way through even the darkest of soils. And just like those pumpkins, we often bloom in ways we never imagined possible. As I stood there in the vibrant glow of the farmer's market, surrounded by the warm aroma of baked goods and the laughter of children weaving through the stalls, I felt a soft breeze brush against my cheek, and for a moment, it was as if the universe was affirming the serendipitous nature of this encounter. Clara and I exchanged stories, her children, their laughter echoing alongside our words, brought life to our conversation. She told me about the pumpkin patch they had started in their backyard, a promised joy for her kids each autumn, how it mirrored her own hopes that had taken years to cultivate after her husband's passing. My heart ached with understanding. I spoke of my own journey, of the seeds I carried and planted through life's seasons, and as I recounted my 20-year ritual, Clara listened with an intensity that felt both comforting and intimate. It dawned on me that she too had known grief, yet here we were, sharing laughter and anticipation, bridging the divides of our histories as if fate had orchestrated this reunion. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting golden rays across the market, I noticed the pumpkin seeds nestled in my pocket, heavy with meaning. They had been a lifeline for me, a testament to hope during solitary nights spent wondering if I'd ever reclaim the joy I once knew. And now, standing here with Clara, it was apparent that through those seeds, I had inadvertently sown hope into others' lives too, reaching far beyond my own existence. The connection we shared felt like the intertwining roots of the very pumpkins her children gathered, binding us together in ways I was only beginning to understand. I could see her tenacious spirit reflected in the way she maneuvered through challenges, nurturing her kids while still embodying her own dreams, and it inspired a shift within me. Perhaps it wasn't merely about tending to the plants but nurturing the bonds we create with each act of kindness, each seed we scatter into the world. The afternoon faded into a soft twilight, the sky painted in delicate hues of lavender and gold, and I knew I didn't want this moment to end. So, with a mixture of excitement and trepidation, I suggested we exchange numbers, confronting the idea of forming a friendship in real time, beyond the realm of chance encounters. Clara's smile bloomed brighter, lighting up her face with enthusiasm. "I'd love that," she said, a gleam in her eyes that mirrored my own beliefs about fate and connection. As we exchanged numbers, I marveled at how easily two people could find a common ground in shared heartache while also discovering the promise of companionship, like two seeds finding their place in the same garden. In the days that followed, our friendship grew in unexpected ways. Texts turned into calls, and those turned into coffee dates that flowed effortlessly, punctuated by laughter and stories of our pasts, binding us closer. I met her kids. They were full of life, each visit to their home unveiling the world through their eyes, imagination unfettered, playfulness reigning supreme. I became a part of their little pumpkin patch, helping them nurture the plants that mirrored not only the story of their growth but also the healing process we all embarked upon together, learning one another's rhythms as shared lives often do. The more I immersed myself in Clara and her children's world, the more I realized how, through the simple act of planting seeds, I'd inadvertently transformed my lonely journey into a tapestry of relationships that enriched my heart and soul. Each pumpkin we nurtured in the garden became a symbol of our collective resilience, echoes of our laughter rustling through the leaves, reminding us of the roots we were cultivating together. I couldn't help but feel that the garden had, in many ways, become an extension of my own personal renaissance, a blossoming of hope and connection. But amidst the joy, I couldn't silence the whispers of doubt that sometimes crept back in. Could this really be it? Could I have truly found a new beginning so soon? One evening, while helping Clara and her kids carve pumpkins for Halloween, I found myself lost in thought, the glittering candlelight casting playful shadows across our faces. Clara must have sensed my distraction because she gently nudged me, her eyes piercing through my fog of insecurities. "What's on your mind?" she asked, genuinely curious. And in that moment, I poured out the remnants of my fears, my vulnerabilities tumbling forth like unwieldy seeds spilling across the ground. With earnest compassion, she reassured me, "Sometimes, we need to trust that the seeds we plant will flourish in their own time. Just as we've sowed pumpkins together, so too have we begun to nurture something beautiful between us." It was a simple, beautiful truth that struck a chord deep within me, urging me to embrace the journey ahead without the weight of expectations. Reflecting back on my 2-decade-long ritual of planting pumpkin seeds everywhere, I realized it wasn't simply about hoping for a garden to grow. It was an embodiment of faith in the power of life's smallest gestures, nurturing connections and building toward a future I couldn't yet comprehend. From that point on, every time I planted a seed in our shared garden, I felt an invitation to lay down roots, not just for the pumpkins but for the relationship budding between us, one that offered a path from solitude into community. Our lives began to intertwine seamlessly, a rhythm of support and companionship that inspired both of us to flourish. Clara and I became each other's harvest, brightening the dull moments of life with laughter and understanding. I watched, day by day, as hope sprouted and took form, nurturing not only the pumpkins in the patch but also the brave new beginnings our lives had shared. And that realization felt as miraculous as witnessing the very first green shoots pushing through the dark, rich soil of our intertwined fates. In the end, I found peace in knowing that sometimes, even the most solitary journeys lead us to unexpected gardens of connection, where laughter and love bloom amidst the shadows. The seeds we scatter throughout our lives may sprout in ways we neither foresee nor understand at first, reminding us that every act of kindness and every moment of honesty bears the potential to transform us into something we can hardly imagine. And as I look around at the thriving pumpkins each harvest season, I am left with not just gratitude but an entire garden of friendships blossoming around me, roots intertwined in ways that span the heart's vast corners, one seed, one connection at a time. Confession: I am a man of highly low intelligence, and there's a very slim chance that will ever change. That might sound like a harsh self-assessment, but when I look back on my life, it feels oddly true. From early on, I always struggled in school, while others grasped concepts with relative ease. I often found myself lost in a sea of confusion. It was a source of contention at home, primarily with my father, who'd often shake his head in frustration, muttering that I was a genuine disappointment. I grew up in the shadow of my brilliant sister, who always had top grades, a perfect college resume, and a charisma that seemed to attract everyone she met. When I graduated high school with a barely passing GPA, I decided to take a different path, one where I wouldn't have to compete against her brilliance. I started working at a local hardware store, surrounded by tools and paint cans, where I felt more at home than I ever did with textbooks. My coworkers accepted me for who I was, and I quickly learned the ins and outs of everything from different types of screws to the best ways to mix paint, the kind of knowledge that didn't really require sharp intellectual aptitude, just a willingness to listen and a decent memory. One fateful evening, as I was restocking shelves alone, I met her, Maria. She was an artist, doing some kind of community project that involved painting fences around town, and she wandered into our store for paint. She had a radiant energy, and as I helped her choose the right colors, her laughter warmed my insides in a way I'd never felt before. We struck up a conversation, and in that moment, surrounded by paint and hardware, I felt a spark of connection that made me forget all about my academic shortcomings. She didn't care that I was terrible at math or that I couldn't remember the capital of Kazakhstan. We talked about art, creativity, and our mutual love for nature. After that, she kept coming back to the store, and we'd share smiles that turned into inside jokes, and eventually, into something deeper. But there was a lingering fear in my heart. As things developed, I began to doubt myself and my worthiness. Maria had been to art schools and galleries, her mind was a treasure chest of culture and ideas, while I was just a guy who knew his way around a lawnmower. One night, I found myself at her place, where we were painting together under soft lighting, and she asked me about my dreams and aspirations. I froze, the question gnashing at a vulnerability I had buried deep. Could I express my dreams when they felt so mundane? I stammered out something about hoping to one day open my own hardware store, a quaint dream, perhaps, but it felt embarrassing next to her ambitions of having a gallery show. She sensed my hesitation and, rather than scoffing or diminishing my dream as I had feared, she smiled and said, "That's an incredible dream. You know you can do it, right?" Her words, rather than uplift me, lodged a sense of dread in my gut. What if she was investing time in a lost cause? As our relationship deepened, so did my anxiety. Each time I left her, I replayed our conversations, fixating on moments where I felt inadequate. I let my imaginations run wild, picturing her telling her friends about her simple boyfriend, a man who barely scraped by. One night, during a particularly vulnerable moment, I confessed my fears to her. I told her that I felt like we lived in two different worlds, one where she was a creative genius, and me, a man struggling to keep up. I braced myself for rejection, the feared look of pity or disappointment that had marked so many of my formative years. Instead, she took my hands and said, "You are more than enough for me. It's not about where we come from or where we're going, it's about the journey we build together." And for the first time, my heart felt a semblance of peace. Months passed, and I threw myself into the things I loved, working at the store, painting with Maria, and learning to embrace my creativity alongside hers. One warm afternoon, she proposed a project for the local art fair, encouraging me to join her in creating something that exhibited both of our talents. The thought terrified me, what if my lack of intelligence shone through in our joint piece? But somehow, I found a glimmer of hope in her vision. Together, we crafted a piece that merged practical elements with artistic flair, making a whimsical garden sculpture from discarded tools. The day of the fair arrived, and standing beside her, I felt an overwhelming sense of pride, not just in our creation but in who I was becoming. People stopped by, impressed with our work, and I realized that maybe, just maybe, intelligence could manifest in forms other than academia. I wasn't just restocking shelves and answering questions, I was creating something meaningful in a world that often dismissed me. As the sun began to set, the fair bustling around us, I took a breath, letting in the fading light that symbolized hope. Maria turned to me, her eyes sparkling, and said, "I knew you had it in you." Today, as I recount this journey, I find myself reflecting not on my seemingly low intelligence, but on my ability to learn and grow in different ways. I might never be a scholar or the wizard of numbers, but I've found a treasure in self-acceptance, an understanding that everyone's mind works differently, and that worth isn't solely defined by traditional intellect. I hope that my experience might resonate with someone else feeling inadequate or overlooked, and that they too might discover their own unique path to fulfillment. And while Maria and I continue our journey, I still think back to the nights spent under a roof of stars, learning to paint both canvases and dreams, trusting that love and creativity truly know no bounds. Update: a few weeks after the fair, we received an unexpected call. The local art gallery wanted to display our sculpture in their local artist showcase. They called it a captivating depiction of ingenuity and asked if we'd both be willing to speak about our collaboration at the event. It seems the journey never really ends, instead, it twists and turns, much like my own thoughts on who I am, a simple man, perhaps, but one who is continuously evolving. As I sat there, staring at the phone in disbelief after that unexpected call from the gallery, I couldn't shake the paradox of my life. How, in my own mind, which often felt muddled and simple, could we have created something that not only captured attention but also reflected our unfolding relationship? The days leading up to the event were a whirlwind, filled with a mixture of nervous anticipation and excitement that colored every moment. I helped Elena put the final touches on our sculpture, a woven collage of discarded materials that was both a physical manifestation of our efforts and a metaphor for our lives, imperfect, but undeniably beautiful. We spent long evenings in her studio, talking about everything and nothing, the quiet hum of the city outside our window punctuating our laughter. As the night of the gallery opening arrived, I nearly choked on my words upon addressing the audience. Standing there in a room filled with bright, brilliantly trained minds and eager art enthusiasts, I felt like an imposter draped in a second-hand suit, my own intelligence seeming to wane with each chuckle or knowing nod from the crowd. But as I spoke about our sculpture and how art had threaded its way into our romance, something shifted within me. I found my voice, steady and clear, illuminating our journey and the symbiotic nature of love and creativity. It was not an act of eloquence but of genuine feeling that transformed my simple words into something meaningful. While some murmured about our unique perspective and unorthodox methodologies, I recognized that what emerged from my mouth was more than just a presentation. It was a reflection of my journey as a man who often felt at odds with a world that valued intellect over passion. Each shared glance with Elena filled me with comfort, a silent reminder that love was smudged with imperfections, and sometimes, especially for someone like me, That was more than enough. There was a camaraderie among us, forged in late-night brainstorming sessions and quiet moments of shared solitude, and as patrons congratulated us after our presentation and poured admiration towards our work, I realized that perhaps being a man of highly low intelligence wasn't solely a deficiency, it was an invitation to explore life through a different lens, one that seemed to appreciate the beauty in the flawed and the fragmented. I even glimpsed admiration in the eyes of the gallery owner as she approached us, speaking with a warmth that enveloped me, acknowledging how our art encapsulated a kind of truth that resonated with many. As I stood there, basking in the glow of unexpected success, I felt the weight of my insecurities begin to lift like fog before a sunrise. While I knew I might not ever be a philosopher or a scientist, I understood that my strength lay not in knowing the intricacies of life but in feeling them deeply. Weeks turned into months, and the gallery opening became a backdrop, a moment in time when the stars aligned just right, illuminating the possibilities that lay ahead. Through it all, Elena and I grew, coupled in this tender evolution, and I found myself modifying my own internal narrative about intelligence. It was symbolic, a feeling of progression rather than a measurable standard. The world outside continued spinning, with its judgments and expectations, but within the cocoon of our connection, we painted new stories on hidden canvases in the quiet of our studio, learning that our experiences together shaped not just our art but our hearts. We even joked about starting an art collective for those of us who felt like outsiders, art for the amateurs, we called it, where creativity mattered more than critique, and anyone with a story to tell could join us, because in the end, who I was and who I became were merely threads in a beautifully chaotic tapestry unraveling before me. As I settled into bed that night, my heart full, I wondered where our newfound journey would take us next, the anticipation warming me like a gentle spring breeze carrying whispers of future possibilities. In the silence that enveloped the room, I made a wish, not for recognition or accolades, but for the strength to embrace my own uniqueness and to keep weaving dreams into reality, just as we had begun to do together. Days turned into weeks, and each morning dawned with a palpable excitement that sparkled in the air like sunlight dancing on the surface of water. As the date of the art gallery showcase approached, Amelia and I poured our hearts into preparing for the event, infusing our conversations with laughter and anticipation. I found myself spending hours in our little studio, the faint scent of paint and clay swirling around me, as our collaboration transformed not just our artwork but also our understanding of each other. We adapted our sculptural piece, adding small details inspired by late-night talks beneath the stars, tiny figures entwined in moments of joy and heartbreak, capturing fragments of stories we shared over warm cups of tea. As I molded the clay, I thought about how far I had come from the days when my thoughts felt heavy and clumsy. This project, this relationship, had made me realize that intelligence wasn't measured solely by the complexities of one's thoughts but also by the capacity for love, resilience, and the willingness to grow. When the night of the exhibit finally arrived, I donned my best shirt, a simple blue that made my eyes sparkle, while Amelia was a vision in a flowy dress that swirled around her like waves. As we entered the gallery, its walls alive with paintings and sculptures, I felt like a child walking into a world of endless possibilities. People mingled, their whispers and laughter creating a symphony that filled the expansive space. Our sculpture stood proudly at the center of the room, a blend of textures and colors showcasing our journey, a physical manifestation of uncertainty and companionship woven into every inch. I took a deep breath, the excitement mingling with a hint of nervousness, as I spotted the event curator making her way toward us. She smiled warmly, her eyes glinting with enthusiasm, and introduced herself as Camille. "The energy you both have together is inspiring," she said. "Your work embodies something deeply human." In that moment, my heart fluttered. Here was acknowledgement, not just of our art, but of the bond we nurtured along the way. As the night wore on, we spoke to visitors, sharing the story behind our sculpture, delving into the emotions, the fears, and the hopes we infused into our creation. I spoke honestly about my journey, about how I had once felt trapped in my own limitations, and how art had become my way of inviting others into my world. To my surprise, many of them didn't just see our sculpture, they resonated with my words, sharing their own struggles and triumphs in return. It felt like building a bridge between hearts, a candid exchange of dreams, fostering connections that evening. As the event began to wind down, the gallery owner announced the highlight of the night, the winner of the Local Artist Showcase Award. My stomach fluttered nervously, I hadn't even considered winning. When our names were called as the recipients, I was momentarily rooted to the spot, disbelief washing over me like a gentle tide. Amelia clasped my hand tightly, her joy infectious, and the applause that erupted around us felt like a warm embrace. When we stepped up to accept our plaque, a beautifully crafted piece of wood engraved with our names, I felt an unfamiliar warmth bloom in my chest. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts, and I spoke from my heart. This isn't just our accomplishment, it reflects the journey we dared to share. I am grateful for my partner in crime, whose love and creativity inspired every moment of this. The audience nodded, many smiling knowingly, as if they could see the truth in my words. Later that night, as we left the gallery hand in hand, the cool breeze danced around us, and the faint sounds of laughter echoed behind. Amelia turned to me, her cheeks flushed with happiness, and said, "We did this together." I admired her, feeling a rush of gratitude for her unwavering support and our shared dreams. It was a reminder of the simple truth that had guided me through this journey, that sometimes, the greatest triumphs come not from grand notions of intelligence, but from the beauty of vulnerability and connection. As we climbed into bed later that night, I whispered a silent vow to cherish this growth, to face each new day not with the weight of expectations, but with the unwavering courage to reveal my true self, the simple man striving to weave dreams into reality. The next chapter awaited, and I knew that no matter where it led, I would embrace it with an open heart, ready for whatever surprise awaited in the tapestry of life. I never thought a simple request could age me a decade overnight, but that's precisely what happened during that fated spring break trip last year. It was meant to be a promise of fun and relaxation, a chance to distance myself from the unrelenting grind of college life and the constant pressure to excel. I was just 21, teetering on the precarious edge of adulthood, enjoying the carefree days of dorm life with my closest friend, Alan. He was the type of guy who could make anyone laugh, his infectious energy always lighting up the room. Together, we decided to head to a beach house owned by his family, knowing full well that the rest of our friends would join in the chaos. The first few days were blissful, sun-kissed skin, laughter echoing against the waves, and late-night bonfires where we told stories that blurred the lines between truth and embellishment. Yet, things took a turn when one evening, while we were sprawled across the sand, Alan slipped me a drink, a potent mix of whatever liquor he'd scavenged from the others. He smirked, raised his glass, and with a teasing tone, asked, "What's the wildest thing you've ever done?" That question hung in the air like a thundercloud, nudging at my insecurities. I had spent years cultivating an image of responsibility, of being the sensible one, while Alan was the party starter. Tempted by the thrill of vulnerability in that moment, I regaled them with an old story from high school, about how I once dared to sneak into a neighbor's pool under the cover of darkness. Laughter erupted, encouraging me, pushing me to divulge more. But it wasn't long before Alan challenged me again, pushing the limits further. "You wouldn't jump off the pier, would you?" He grinned, and the eyes of our friends lit up with a mix of excitement and disbelief. The old me would have steered clear of such recklessness, but a strange blend of courage and foolishness swept over me, igniting a fierce desire to break free from my self-imposed shackles. With a nod, I found myself racing toward the edge of the dock, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I could hear my friends cheering behind me, urging me on, and before I knew it, I leapt into the crystalline depths below. The rush was exhilarating, a heady concoction of laughter, shouts, and splashes, momentarily washing away my worries. But as I resurfaced, gasping for air, joy transformed into horror as I glanced back toward the pier. Seconds later, I watched as Alan's expression changed from delight to shock. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed someone struggling against the cold waves. In an instant, I transformed from the reckless adventurer into a lifeguard, instinct guiding my actions as I propelled through the water to reach them. I could hear the panic in their shouts, muffled by the roar of the sea, but I reached the girl just in time. Her eyes were wide with fear as I wrapped my arm around her, kicking hard against the tide, but despite my efforts, we both struggled in the frigid waters. Eventually, I managed to pull her back up to the wooden dock, panting and shivering, but all I could think about was the tide of realizations crashing over me. I had not been the brave hero, I was just a scared kid from that moment on, preferring to cling to safety even more viciously than before. The girl, it turned out, was fine, just shaken. Her grateful smile was the sole light in the rising storm of my thoughts. But that night, my recklessness morphed into something darker, deeper, as I reflected on the fine line that separates youthful adventure from genuine danger. In the days that followed, the initial thrill of spring break was replaced with a creeping sense of responsibility that shadowed me relentlessly. I found myself analyzing every risk, every decision, questioning who I was beyond the facade of carefree college life. I used to see life as a series of leaps into excitement, but now, I felt the weight of consequences heavily upon my shoulders. My peers resumed their laughter and beach games like nothing happened, but I couldn't shake off the feeling that I'd lost a piece of myself that day. As the sun began to set on our final night at the beach, everyone gathered for one last bonfire as the flames flickered like my restless thoughts. I sat quietly, observing my friends' jubilant revelry from the periphery, acutely aware of the stark contrast between their joy and my rising anxiety. I couldn't help but think I had aged more than just a few years in that moment, a concept that kept reverberating through my mind like a haunting echo. I felt the invisible scars deepen, accepting that growing up meant grappling with heavier choices and bearing the weight of the world with every decision I made from then on. But that's when Alan nudged me, pulling me to join in the spontaneous late-night dance party that had broken out, lifting the weight of the world just barely off my shoulders. In that shared moment, as music flowed through the air, I began to realize that this perverse cycle of responsibility and recklessness could coexist. Yet, the laughter felt different, more bittersweet than before, tinged with the reminder of what could have been. Months later, I still ponder how that trip aged me in ways I hadn't anticipated but subtly come to accept that it was all part of my evolving story. I learned to embrace the lessons learned through moments of fear and joy alike, balancing life's risks with the warm glow of memories shared with friends. And while I may have accelerated into adulthood that spring, I also forged deeper connections, finally realizing that each moment, laden with meaning, is the true essence of growing up, one beautiful, terrifying leap at a time. And now, as I sit in my dimly lit room, reflecting on that chaotic trip, I know I'm not the same person I was before that pier. You always carry a piece of it with you, don't you? The wildness of youth combined with the wisdom gained from necessity, teaching you to dance through life's invitations and the whispers of its dangers all the same. Update: just this past weekend, I found myself at a gathering, one of many new adventures that have formed since that exhilarating flash of recklessness. Alan was there, of course, making jokes and riling everyone up, and amid the merriment, he pulled me aside to reminisce. Remember that pier jump? You were the hero of the hour, he laughed lightly. I chuckled but replied, yeah, but it aged me too, you know? He looked thoughtful for a moment before grinning, maybe a year or two, but you've grown. You're stronger, he said, clasping my shoulder. And I realized then that he was right. Sometimes, the moments that seem to age us the quickest can be the very ones that define us for years to come. As we returned to the lively kitchen filled with the aroma of homemade pasta and the sound of laughter, I couldn't shake off that moment with Alan. It was strange how a simple conversation could unravel a deeper thread in the fabric of my life. I felt an echo of nostalgia buried beneath layers of worry and responsibility. I watched as my friends swirled around in their carefree dance of adulthood, the kind we often take for granted until time itself shows its teeth. The years were marching on, yet here we were, caught in a time bubble, the weight of our shared memories lightening the burdens of our separate lives. With every toast and cheer, my mind flickered back to my own personal strife, balancing the chaos of work and family, dreams deferred, and aspirations left half-spoken. What had once felt like vibrant ambitions now felt like aging echoes of my former self. I found solace in the comforting warmth of companionship, but there was a tinge of melancholy that hung around like an uninvited guest. As the night deepened, Alan gathered us for a game that was meant for bonding but, as I soon discovered, it unraveled deeper fissures. He proposed a round of truth or dare, a harmless nostalgia trip that began with giggles and light teasing. But as it circled around, the dares shifted from fun challenges to deeper revelations, pulling secrets and insecurities from the shadows. I found myself holding my breath waiting for the inevitable moment when someone would push too far, and my stomach knotted at the thought of what might be unearthed. When it came my turn, I chose truth, and Alan, with that mischievous twinkle in his eye, asked, "What's something you've done that you wish you could take back?" I could feel the pulse of the room stutter in anticipation, my heart thundering against my ribcage. What came to mind wasn't one single action but an amalgamation of tiny moments, the sting of envy when a friend succeeded, the harsh words hurled during an argument with my partner, the silent nights that slipped by under the weight of unspoken feelings. Instead of sharing those, I found myself morphed by instinct into a version of me that swaddled vulnerability and masked it with humor. I'd take back that day I thought it would be funny to throw a cherry bomb in the school bathroom. I chuckled, the laughter hollow in my throat, and for a moment, shared laughter filled the gap where discomfort dwelled. But that laughter soon faded as the dares grew more daring, revealing true fears and regrets. It became clear that we all bore the marks of our experiences, some more than others. When it was Alan's turn again, he smirked and said, "Okay, dare me to sing a song." But something in the way he played with his drink gave it all away. The smile never quite reached his eyes. Perhaps in that moment, everyone realized, for all the laughter and bravado, we were suspended in the perils of adulthood that seemed to sap away the essence of carefree youth. As the reality of our fragile unmasking settled over us, I found myself more aware than ever of how quickly years can slip by and change us. The carefree evenings of our youth were now sprinkled with the stardust of nostalgia but marred by the gravity of regret and responsibility. Later that night, as I whispered goodnight to my friends and climbed into bed, I couldn't escape the haunting truth that came with the joy of reunion: nothing stays the same, and clinging to the past sometimes only amplifies the ache of becoming. I closed my eyes, listening to the distant echoes of laughter drifting from the party still happening down the hall, and contemplated how every trial we endured, every choice that stung, contributed to the elevation of our lives, whether we liked it or not. In the insistent quiet of the night, I understood that these seemingly aging moments, both burdens and blessings, were the very threads that stitched our stories together. I saw the glimmer of hope in change, in growth, as I came to the realization that defining those moments from the past would not just contour my existence but also establish the path for journeys yet to come. As I drifted into sleep, my mind wandered to the idea of seeking out each experience, embracing even the pain, like sculptors shaping their creations, understanding that just as love and laughter could nourish, fears and regrets could forge resilience. Life doesn't just age us, it crafts us, one unassuming night at a time. Update: a week later, after our reunion, I received a message from Alan, asking if we could meet up. Skeptical at first, I agreed, intrigued. We met at the park where we used to hang out as kids, and as we walked, he admitted that he had been struggling with his own demons, an unexpected job loss and feeling inadequate. I could see the toll it had taken on him, and somewhere within me, I realized that though life might age us, it could also connect us in newfound ways. Through that honest exchange, we made a pact to not only be there for each other but to face life's hurdles together, renewing our friendship after years of drifting apart. In that moment, it was clear, the journeys that once seemed daunting were now avenues for growth. Together we could battle the inevitability of aging, one small victory at a time. The rest of the evening unfolded like a dream, the soft golden hue of the setting sun spilling through the trees as it cast playful shadows on the grass. I felt an unexpected surge of gratitude for this gathering. It was more than just a reunion, it had morphed into a ceremony of solace, a reminder that the scars life left behind weren't just signs of hardship but also badges of honor, stories that could bridge the distances created by time and circumstance. As we lounged around the fire pit, roasting marshmallows and sharing light-hearted banter, I couldn't help but take note of Alan's infectious laughter, a sound that still echoed in my mind long after it faded. It pulled me back to simpler days, times when our biggest concerns revolved around surreptitious adventures rather than mortgages or career trajectories. Amid the laughter, I glanced around the circle of friends, observing familiar faces now softened by time, laughter lines deepening yet exuding a warmth that suggested resilience and shared history. Later in the night, when the conversation turned slanted under the weight of intimacy and vulnerability, I felt compelled to share a deeper part of my own journey. I spoke of my struggles with anxiety that had unraveled quietly beneath the surface like a steadily rising tide. The reactions varied, some expressed understanding, while others listened intently, searching for an anchor within my words, a piece of their own experience reflected back. In that space, my age felt like a cloak that had momentarily slipped away, revealing the essence of who we've all become, an understanding that time might play tricks on our bodies, but it also created richness within our souls. When the gathering finally dispersed under a pale moon, I felt that renewal swell within me, a hope that my friendship with Alan and the others would not wane again. In the days that followed, our pact became an organic ritual, as natural as breathing. We met every week, sharing meals, laughter, and the weight of our experiences. Together, we navigated our anxieties, our losses, and the nagging fears that haunted us. Slowly, I began to witness the remarkable transformation in us all. Alan found clarity in his career path, and his laughter returned, more uninhibited. I noticed that sharing our struggles didn't age us prematurely but rather added depth to our friendship, enriching our interactions in ways we hadn't fathomed before. Weeks rolled into months, and as seasons shifted, I felt a strange kinship with the years that had passed. Each joyous gathering turned into a celebration of what it meant to grow, not just older but, more importantly, evolved as individuals tethered through shared understanding. It was an unexpected journey, where the very things that threatened to age us, our fears, losses, regrets, actually forged unbreakable bonds. We learned that life was not just About the passage of time, but about the richness of shared experiences, laughter that lingered long after we parted ways, and the unseen scars that told our stories of survival. Reflecting on it all, I realized that with each passing year, I felt less inclined to fear aging. Instead, I embraced it, recognizing that the moments that truly age a person are not so much the events themselves but how those events shape our hearts, our connections, and our understanding of what it means to be alive. And while life continues to throw its curveballs, challenges that will inevitably come, there's comfort in the knowledge that we are in this together, each experience a thread stitching us closer to one another. Months later, at another gathering meant to mark a cathartic year, Alan raised his glass, eyes sparkling with a fierce joy. "Here's to moving forward, to aging together," he proclaimed, a toast that resonated deeply within me. And I lifted my glass, not just to the friendships we had rekindled or the trials we had faced, but to the beautiful realization that aging is but another chapter of living authentically, with cherished companions beside us. In the warmth of that moment, I also felt a silent promise to myself, never to take for granted the people who grace my life with their authenticity, influencing me more profoundly than the relentless march of time ever could. So, here's to the inevitable changes that life presents, always met with open arms and willing hearts, redefining the very essence of what it means to truly grow. And perhaps that's the greatest victory of all. Aging is not a solitary endeavor but a collective undertaking, a journey worth embarking on together. It started on an ordinary Tuesday evening, the kind that melts into your memory like butter on warm bread. My friend Lily had come over for dinner. She was what people called a people person, always bubbling with enthusiasm, her wide smile lighting up any room. I'd known her for years, but I was beginning to worry that her inquisitiveness was turning into a kind of obsession, especially concerning my girlfriend, Maya. Upon our first introduction a few months ago, Maya had been shy, and who could blame her? She was stepping into a circle of friends who had known each other for ages, and I felt a twinge of protectiveness towards her. While Lily greeted her with a warm embrace and relentless questioning, I brushed it off, thinking perhaps it was just Lily being herself. But over time, I saw how Maya's shy demeanor would slip into discomfort whenever Lily would pry into her personal life, questions about her family, her job, even the small scars on her wrists that she often covered with long sleeves. I could sense Maya's unease but tried to ease it by changing the subject or steering the conversation in a different direction. That night, I made pasta, a simple but delectable dish that usually brought us all together. However, the tension simmering beneath the surface lingered like an uninvited guest. Halfway through dinner, Lily leaned across the table, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "So, Maya, why don't you tell me about the therapy you were in? I've been dying to know what that was like." I saw Maya's cheeks flush, her fork pausing mid-air, and I felt the heat rise within me. My heart raced as I struggled to find the right words. It wasn't merely curious questioning, it felt invasive, and in that moment, my protectiveness flared. I turned sharply to Lily, perhaps too sharply. "Can you just drop it, Lily? Not everyone wants their history dissected at the dinner table." The silence was thick, as if the air had been sucked out of the room, Maya's eyes wide with surprise and a flicker of relief, but I could also see her disappointment. I felt bad almost instantly for raising my voice, but I was too wrapped up in my determination to shield Maya from Lily's relentless probing. It felt like a necessary, albeit awkward, confrontation that I hoped would put an end to Lily's intrusive nature. After dinner, things were tense. Lily muttered a half-hearted apology, but I could see she didn't grasp the gravity of her actions. Maya's eyes, usually a vibrant mix of green and brown, appeared dulled by discomfort. She was sweet and didn't want to create waves, but I knew she felt uneasy around Lily, and I couldn't shake the guilt spiraling within me for yelling at someone who had meant no harm. That night, I lay awake, replaying the moment in my mind. I wondered if I had overreacted, if maybe I could have found a gentler way to enforce boundaries with Lily. I cared about her, too. She had always been helpful and supportive in past relationships, but this time it felt different. As weeks passed, I tried talking to Lily, attempting to mend whatever rift my outburst had created. But she remained distant, and every attempt I made seemed to elicit more frustration from her, which pushed me further into my shell. On the other hand, Maya and I grew closer as she began to confide in me more. Our conversations turned from light-hearted banter to deeper discussions about her past, her struggles, and her triumphs. I saw the person she truly was, a fighter under the surface, and that made me question whether enforcing boundaries with Lily had been worth it. Until one evening, after another dinner filled with awkward silences and strained jokes, Maya gently placed her hand on mine. She looked into my eyes and said, I don't need you to protect me from her, I can handle it. But don't you dare push me away for her. It was a wake-up call, and I realized in that moment that I was being unfair to her for not trusting her capacity to handle the situation, and unfair to Lily for not giving her the chance to admit her mistakes. That night, I decided to fix things, not just for me, but for Maya too. So, I called Lily, filled with newfound conviction, and invited her to join us for brunch that coming Sunday. When the day arrived, I took a deep breath and confronted her in front of Maya, articulating how I felt about her questions and how they affected Maya, not accusing, but inviting her to understand. Shockingly, she listened, really listened. I saw that familiar glimmer of understanding in her eyes, and that day, the air became lighter as we all discussed boundaries and respect in relationships. It felt liberating, like we were redefining our friendship for the better. Later that evening, as we departed, Lily hugged me and promised to be more mindful. Maya smiled warmly, and for the first time in months, I felt that comforting optimism about our relationships, a refreshing reminder of the complexities of friendships and love. A few weeks later, I received a message from Lily, asking about Maya's writing ambitions and how she could support her. I chuckled. It seemed Lily had genuinely dug deep in her heart to unpack her inquisitive nature. Life felt balanced again, reminding me of the delicate dance we all engage in when connecting with others, a dance, often complicated, yet ultimately worthwhile when met with honesty and understanding. I thought about the message while sitting at my desk, the late afternoon sun filtering through the blinds, casting long, warm shadows across the wooden surface. The way Lily had reached out felt like a gentle olive branch after a storm, something I had not anticipated but desperately needed. Her newfound interest in Maya's ambitions struck me as sincere, perhaps even a realization of her previous intrusiveness. I also couldn't shake off the feeling that my explosion of frustration had not just changed the dynamic of our relationships but had forced everyone, including myself, to take a step back and reassess boundaries. My feelings for Maya lingered in the back of my mind. They sparkled with a mix of pride and affection as I recalled how passionately she spoke about weaving her fears and dreams into narrative threads. I contemplated how hard she worked, often into the early hours of the morning, hunched over her laptop, chasing her elusive dreams. To see her finally getting recognition from conditions outside our little circle felt like fireworks within me, igniting a sense of gratitude for the seemingly chaotic path that had led us all here. When I presented Lily's message to Maya during our weekend coffee ritual, a comforting routine where laughter punctuated our still morning moments, she perked up, her eyes dancing with enthusiasm. "I think it's sweet," she exclaimed, the genuine warmth encapsulating her more than the caffeine ever could. As we discussed the best responses to send, I dug deeper into my thoughts. Maya, maybe this could encourage her to be more supportive rather than just nosy? My intent was to prod her to see it as a chance for healing, for growth, and a possible bridge forward. Throughout the week, my optimism clung to me, unwavering, as if I had gathered energy from the harmony that surrounded us. I began noticing small changes within our group dynamics. Lily's inquisitiveness shifted from being prying to a form of support. She began asking more about Maya's work in the positive light of genuine interest. During our usual game nights, instead of steering conversations toward the personal, Lily inquired about story ideas and offered her own interpretations of Maya's themes, which sparked delightful discussions and sparked inspirations. The months of tension seemed to evaporate, replaced by the sweetness of camaraderie regrowing gently. Yet, the trip was not without its nuances. My instinct to protect Maya sometimes felt overwhelming. I would catch myself watching Lily closely, waiting for signs of her curiosity morphing back into the invasive territory we had danced around before. Maya noticed the change in me, and during one quiet evening as we strolled along the lit-up streets, she turned to me, her expression serious yet soft. "You know, I can handle Lily," she assured, and in her voice lay the strength that had drawn me to her in the first place. "Her curiosity comes from a good place now, she just needed a little nudge to realize how much more significant it is to listen than to pry." In that moment, I recognized the foundation Maya had built, not just for herself in her writing, but in our friendships too. I felt both admiration and resignation, a quiet acceptance that we all must learn, stumble, and yet eventually grow into a better version of ourselves. Thus, I put aside my protective instincts and focused instead on my own growth, fostering a healthy space where the line between support and nosiness could stand strong and clear. With time, I slowly allowed my defenses to lower. I was learning, just as Maya was, that relationships thrive not on the avoidance of conflict but through engagement and resolution. An unexpected evening rolled in when I checked my phone to find a notification. It was a group message from Maya, presenting a small gathering, an invitation to share her writing project with friends, including Lily, who had no idea she'd be involved. The anticipation mixed with nervous excitement fluttered in my chest as I read Maya's words aloud, the rhythm of her voice echoing through our cozy living room. I'm inviting you all over next week for a reading and discussion. Bring your open minds, and maybe some snacks. As the date approached, I marveled at how much had transpired within a short span. Though apprehensive, the prospect of unearthing these unspoken conversations excited me. On the evening of the gathering, as friends settled into our living room, I sensed a comforting energy filling the air, like a soft blanket ready to wrap around us. Lily arrived promptly, her eagerness palpable, and I watched how she interacted with Maya. They exchanged anticipatory glances, and Lily listened intently as Maya shared her thoughts and insights on her work and the journey she took to get there. I felt proud, my heart swelling as I noticed the respectful curiosity Lily demonstrated, and perhaps it was then that I realized this night was not merely about Maya showcasing her writing, it was an exploration of friendship, vulnerability, and personal growth within the space we shared. And so, as Maya began to read, her voice resonating beautifully in the hushed room, I leaned back, enveloping myself in the warmth of connections rekindled, recognizing that life, in all its complexities, often finds a way to heal if we gather the courage to confront it. Many years down the line, those moments would live with me, whispering reminders of the growth found along this intricate journey of friendship and love. And in that beautiful small room filled with words, laughter, and understanding, we found our dance, soft, gentle, yet vibrant against the backdrop of all we had endured. As the years unfurled, life continued weaving its intricate tapestry, capturing threads of joy, sorrow, and unexpected revelations. Those evenings with Maya and Lily remained etched in my memory, like a favorite song whose melody, once heard, resonates forever. The three of us settled into a new rhythm. It felt as if we had taken each other's hands, stepping in sync to a beat of shared ambitions and mutual respect. Maya blossomed in her writing, she began getting published in local magazines and sharing her work at open mic nights. I watched her shine brighter with every word she shared, the girl who had once been hesitant now standing tall at the podium, radiating confidence, her stories captivating everyone around. Lily, too, found her own sense of purpose. Inspired by Maya's artistic journey, she explored her passion for photography. She would often invite us to join her on weekend shoots, the three of us wandering through streets, capturing candid moments of life. As we traipsed through parks, urban corners, and hidden alleyways, I became fascinated by how Lily would frame her shots, the way the light could transform an ordinary scene into something extraordinary. In those moments, it felt like we were painting a larger picture together, more than just a collection of memories, but a testament to how our keen interests intertwined beautifully. Still, lurking beneath the surface, I could feel the remnants of those early conflicts, whispers of residue from our past misunderstandings. Occasionally, even in our newfound harmony, my mind would drift back to that day when I had exploded at Lily for her intrusive curiosity, wondering if the shadows of it would ever truly fade. There would be moments when she would joke about her nosiness, laughter filling the air, yet I couldn't shake the feeling of needing to protect Maya, that instinct to shield her from anything that might taint her blossoming confidence. It was a delicate balance, the weight of our past pressing lightly on my shoulders, and yet I found comfort in knowing our bond was stronger than those fissures. One evening, as we gathered at our usual spot, a local cafe adorned with fairy lights and the aroma of fresh pastries wafting in the air, Maya surprised us both. She shared that she'd been accepted into a writing retreat, an opportunity she had been coveting for years. The excitement in her eyes was contagious, a spark igniting between us. "I can't believe it," she exclaimed, her voice ringing with disbelief. "I actually made it." Lily and I erupted in joyous applause, our cheers mingling with the sound of clinking coffee cups and the soft hum of chatter surrounding us. Yet, as I basked in the delight of her moment, I could sense the undertow of fear that often came up during periods of immense personal growth, the fear of change. But what if it's not what I expect? Maya pondered aloud, her brows knitting together in concern. In that instant, it was easy for me to forget my silent reservations. I leaned closer. "But what if it is? What if this is the beginning of something incredible?" I responded, remembering how we had navigated through uncertainty together. And as Maya brunched a motivational speech into the air, Lily chimed in, reminding us both of the beauty that lies in risk. That evening, we took our time sipping on rich, dark coffee and indulging in sweet pastries. We exchanged dreams, fears, and heartbeats, creating a mosaic of our aspirations. It felt liberating to witness how far we had come while knowing the journey was far from over. Weeks passed, a gentle flow guiding us toward Maya's retreat date. In the hustle and bustle of preparing, I received a call from Maya after she had settled in at the retreat house. Her voice trembled with a mix of excitement and vulnerability. I thought I'd be terrified, but everyone here is so supportive. I feel my heart opening up in ways I never knew were possible. I could hear the warmth in her tone, a reflection of how far she had come. As I listened, I realized that she was carving out not just her identity as a writer but also reshaping how we all understood our connections to one another. When Maya returned, there was a lightness about her, a deeper understanding that seemed to transcend words. One evening, as we gathered on my porch, she shared stories of vulnerability shared among writers, of finding not just advocacy but community. That night, as the stars blossomed overhead, those shadows of past misunderstandings and echoes of our complex beginnings simply vanished amidst the laughter and the warmth of friendship. Reflecting on our journey, I understood our dance. Life is a dance, indeed, sometimes solo, sometimes in pairs, often a whirlwind of unpredictable turns and dips, but always brighter on the other side when the music stops. Time has its way of binding souls, if only we dare to unfurl our hearts. I cherished that, for the growth we had experienced was profound. Roots woven through the complexities of our relationships had forged a canopy of understanding and strength, a shelter in which we could hone our dreams uninhibited. And so, beneath the vastness of those shimmering stars, I held that night close, a vivid reminder to embrace all the intricacies threading through the heart of friendship, love, and shared journeys. There are moments in life that shimmer with an irrepressible magic, etching themselves into the fabric of our memory, and sometimes they arrive when we least expect them. It all started on a rainy Wednesday, the kind where the sky drips gray and the world feels muted, a perfect excuse to stay in, wrapped in blankets with a book and a cup of tea. I had just broken up with Jake, a charming guy with a smile that could light up a room, but an emotional distance that left me feeling cold. I spent days mulling over our disintegration, wondering how it had gone from sweet promises whispered over candlelit dinners to awkward silences filled with things unsaid. It was in this fog of introspection that my phone buzzed. A notification from a book club app that I barely kept up with. Intrigued, I opened it to find a message from someone I had never conversed with before, a fellow member named Marcus. He had posted something simple, asking for recommendations on books about personal growth. My curiosity piqued, I tapped out a response, hinting at the layers of complexity I found in books like The Alchemist and Atomic Habits. I didn't expect the conversation to continue, but Marcus replied almost immediately, elaborating on his personal struggles and how literature had been a refuge for him during tough times. What unfolded over the next hour was an exchange unlike any I'd experienced before. He spoke openly about vulnerability and the importance of self-reflection, qualities often overlooked in our fast-paced lives. Each message felt like unwrapping a gift, revealing parts of himself wrapped in honesty and warmth. As the clock silently marked the passing hours, I felt an electric connection begin to spark through the weighted silence that had settled over my heart since Jake. I learned that Marcus was a teacher at a local school, dedicated to helping students find their passion, a fact that resonated with me deeply. It was refreshing to see someone who wanted to make a difference, not just in the classroom but as a person. He shared anecdotes of his students, the struggles they faced, and how life had shaped him into someone who believes in the power of kindness, not because he had to, but because he genuinely wanted to. That emotional depth was intoxicating. When I reluctantly closed my phone that night, a sense of contentment washed over me, replacing the anxiety I had been harboring. Little did I know, this new friendship would take me through a powerful transformation. Over the next few weeks, we would exchange thoughts on everything from life philosophies to the best local coffee spots, finding a rhythm that felt just right. But one sunny Saturday morning, he asked if I wanted to grab coffee in person. My heart raced. This was the moment to step away from the comfort of screens and into uncharted territory. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, feeling both a rush of anticipation and a tremor of doubt. What if it was a disaster? What if the chemistry did not translate beyond the brightly lit screens? Steeling myself, I agreed, buoyed by the hope that had rooted itself so deeply in my chest. The day of our meeting dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the uncertainty brewing inside me. As I sat across from Marcus in a cozy cafe, the sunlight filtering through the large windows casting warm light across the rustic wooden tables, I felt an unexpected wave of calm. We chatted as if we were old friends, the conversation flowing effortlessly, punctuated by infectious laughter that drew curious glances from other patrons. Slowly, I began to see glimpses of the person behind the messages, the vulnerability in his eyes when he spoke of personal losses, the passion that ignited his tone when discussing his hopes for his students. It was crystal clear that this was a man who cared deeply about the world and all its intricacies. However, the moment that stood out the most was when, in the middle of a conversation about a favorite book, Marcus caught sight of a homeless man outside the cafe, holding a cardboard sign. Rather than ignore him, Marcus excused himself and walked outside, speaking to the man in hushed tones. I watched, a mix of admiration and bewilderment washing over me, as he handed him the contents of his own lunch, an exquisite Black Forest sandwich he had just ordered with extra care. He returned, a soft smile on his face, but my heart felt heavy with the realization of the depth of his character. This was someone who saw people, really saw them. The world blurred momentarily, I could barely process the warmth that flooded my chest, a mix of respect and affection that had come out of nowhere. As we continued to talk, I found myself hoping for a future intertwined with this respectful, kind-hearted man, and my mind drifted back to Jake and the many things that led to our unraveling. I learned that sometimes, it's those little moments, like sharing a meal or acknowledging someone who might usually go unnoticed, that truly illustrate a person's worth. Days turned into weeks, and we began dating, exploring local parks, attending literature events, and discovering art galleries together. Every encounter deepened my belief that I had stumbled upon something rare with Marcus, his kindness casting shadows on my previous relationships. It took time, but with openness, he encouraged me to embrace my emotions, no longer feeling the need to cloak them in pretense. I often found myself reflecting on that rainy night when we first connected, wondering if my decision to engage in a simple conversation had altered the course of my life. It made me realize that sometimes, it simply takes one person to truly understand you to change everything. And just when I thought life couldn't surprise me any longer, Marcus announced he had signed up for a local volunteering program that aimed to help feed those in need. Without hesitation, I joined him. Together, we cooked, prepared meals, and served food, with the hope that we would one day be part of the change that transcended beyond our cafe conversations. Life keeps rolling forward, the days falling like leaves from a tree, each one different yet evolving beautifully in its own right. So here I sit, grateful for vulnerability, for connection, and for a man who took a moment to care, not just for the words I shared, but for the humanity around him. Perhaps I would still be wrapped in blankets, searching for something I had lost, if not for a simple notification on a dreary day. After all, isn't that how life unfolds? You just have to be present for the magic. I find myself in a cozy corner of my living room, the soft glow of the fairy lights wrapping around the walls like a comforting embrace. I had long resigned myself to the idea of solitude, filling my evenings with stories woven from the threads of fiction and the dim light of my imagination. My mornings danced to the monotonous tune of coffee brewing and emails pinging. It was a rhythm I knew well, but one that seemed to grind on my spirit with each passing week. Until that day at the cafe, sitting across from Mark, I had thought that perhaps my story was one of quiet solitude, a life observed from the sidelines. But he disrupted that narrative effortlessly with his warmth and authenticity, like a sudden ray of sun breaking through a cloudy sky. He listened, really listened, as I shared tales of my fears and aspirations, his dark eyes reflecting a genuine curiosity that was contagious. I remember a particularly rainy afternoon, the sound of droplets tap dancing against the cafe window while I unwrapped layers of my heart. I spoke of feeling lost in my work, of wanting to venture beyond the confines of my comfort zone yet being tethered to the security of familiarity. As I finished, I caught a faint smile dancing on his lips. "You know," he said softly, "the only real boundaries we face are the ones we impose on ourselves. What if you took that leap? What if you stepped into the unknown?" His words hung in the air, and I pondered them long after the cafe closed that day, echoing through my thoughts like a persistent melody. In the weeks that followed, our meetups became a salvation from the loneliness that loomed beyond my walls. His insights were not just words, they were keys that began to unlock doors inside me. With each conversation, the branches of my worldview expanded, reaching toward experiences I had once thought were impossible. I started exploring painting, something I had tried once in high school but dismissed as a failure, the shame of that long-ago critique by a judge too stingy to appreciate the art of the moment. Inspired by Mark's encouragement, I splashed colors on canvas, my brushes dancing with joy and uncertainty, the very essence of vulnerability spilling forth in vivid hues. The act of creating became a sanctuary, a place where I found myself unmasking layers built over the years. One evening, as we chatted and sipped tea in my favorite cafe, Mark shared a turning point in his own life, a story so eerily parallel to mine yet uniquely different, rooted in struggles and triumphs that made me appreciate him even more. He had faced his own demons, and instead of running away, he dove deeper, confronting them as one confronts a storm. That night, I suddenly felt a connection stretching beyond friendship, ignited by openness and honesty, as we shared pieces of ourselves we had held tightly to for far too long. Yet, the fear of complicating this connection whispered doubts in my mind. Was it foolish to long for something more, to risk what we had built? But as Mark and I delved deeper into discussions, about dreams that loomed just out of reach, fears that felt insurmountable, and possibilities that seemed to shimmer like stars on a clear night, I realized that with him, there was a comfort in vulnerability, a safety net woven from mutual respect and shared experiences. The shift was subtle yet profound, and one day, as we savored the rich aroma of freshly ground coffee, I found my heartbeat racing. "Mark," I started, my voice steady through the tremor of anticipation, "do you think it's possible for friends to become something more?" The atmosphere thickened with tension, yet beneath it lay an unspoken promise. His gaze didn't falter, instead, it softened, and in that beautiful, breathless moment, everything shifted once again. "I was hoping you'd say that," he replied, a grin breaking the seriousness of his expression. In the haze of that afternoon, I felt as if our lives were threads being stitched into a larger tapestry, each stitch vibrant and alive. And just like that, the prospects of love, connection, and belonging became a canvas we painted together. As I reflect on this journey, I realize it was about more than just a simple attraction or shared cups of coffee. It became about rediscovering myself, about exploring the concept of vulnerability in relationships. Mark taught me that sometimes, when we allow ourselves to be seen, we invite not only connection but also the chance to grow, to evolve into versions of ourselves we haven't yet met. Perhaps, in the end, it was never just about him being different, but about how, through him, I could discover the facets of my own heart that had long been shrouded in shadows. That dreary day I received that notification felt like a distant memory now, buried under layers of laughter and shared dreams. I hold on to hope, not just for what's to come, but for the beauty found in simply being present for all that life has to offer. And as I lay in the quiet of my softly lit room, I can't help but smile, knowing that the simplest of moments can unfurl the most profound transformations, leaving us to wonder just how many other connections lie waiting, just outside the door of our comfort zones, ready to blossom if only we open ourselves up to the magic. As I basked in that tranquil moment, my reflection danced in the dusklit window, a reminder of a time I often replayed in my mind. I thought back to the first day I met Milo, the boy who burst into my life like a sudden summer rain, refreshing and unexpected. It was a chilly Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day where even the warmth of the coffee shop ticked just a bit too low on the thermostat, the scent of cinnamon laced throughout but feeling lost in the gloom. I sat hunched over my laptop, shrouded in layers of my emotional fortitude, consumed by words that refused to flow. Above the dull hum of the espresso machine, the world outside dimmed with the encroaching evening, and my thoughts tossed themselves around in chaotic knots. Just then, I heard the door swing open, and an unfamiliar face stepped in, glancing around until his gaze landed on a solitary empty table near mine. Even from a distance, I knew he was different. There was a spark of genuine curiosity in his eyes, a warm glimmer that rippled through the cafe as he settled into his chair. His hair was tousled, and his clothes looked slightly rumpled, but it was the quiet confidence in his demeanor that captured my attention. Milo pulled out a sketchbook, its pages filled with intricate doodles, and as he began to draw, the world around him seemed to fade into the background. I couldn't help but steal glances at his art, each stroke of his pencil revealing stories I yearned to know, stories that whispered to me as they met the paper. In a twist of courage buoyed by curiosity, I leaned over a little, letting my eyes devour the depth of his creativity. He noticed me, his brow raising in a friendly challenge, and unexpectedly, he grinned, that lovely, boyish grin illuminating his face. "You look like you could use a little inspiration," he said, inviting me into his enchanting world with a playful confidence. What drew me in was not just his talent but the way he didn't shy away from the connection. He took the chance to spark conversation, and before long, our shared laughter unraveled the tension that had gripped my heart. Hours slipped by unnoticed. We swapped stories, my struggles, his quiet dreams of an artist's life somewhere vibrantly outside these cafe walls, and I found myself unwinding like a tightly wound spring, revealing pieces of my heart I had nearly forgotten. It felt surreal, almost like I was stepping off a path I had walked for far too long, wandering into new territory where warmth and kindness danced around us like fireflies lighting the dusk. Our discussions flowed effortlessly, and with every sentence, a burgeoning friendship unfurled like petals kissed awake by the sun. As we parted that day, I didn't just walk back into the world outside, I crossed a threshold forged by connection, where vulnerabilities were shared and dreams no longer felt quite so distant. The weeks transformed into months, and our coffee shop became a beacon of ease amid the turbulence of life, an oasis of warmth where fears faded, replaced with dreams laid bare. With each encounter, I was met with expressions of empathy intertwined with gentle humor, and my initial hesitance melted. It was an awakening of the heart, discovering just how much healing resides in connection without pretense. The conversations meandered from our shared loves for art and music to the intricacies of life's struggles, loss, uncertainty, and the delicate dance of pursuing our passions. Each encounter felt like unwinding a thread, weaving together the fragmented pieces of our lives into a tapestry more vibrant than I ever anticipated. In this space, I uncovered what had been lurking within me, a long-buried desire for authenticity. I opened up about my fears, about how loneliness clung to me like a shadow, how I had long stopped believing I mattered. Yet, every time I shared, Milo listened more intently, his eyes reflecting empathy that brought warmth on even the coldest of days. In return, he would unfurl snippets of his own insecurities, tales of rejection as an artist, and the question of whether his passion would ever bear fruit. At this exchange, we somehow brewed a potion of mutual encouragement, our dreams blossoming within those small, safe moments where nothing felt insurmountable. And then, one fateful evening, under the soft, flickering candlelight of our usual table, Milo leaned across with a look that should have startled me, but instead felt like an inevitability. "You know," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper yet tinged with urgency, "you have this incredible light in you, and it feels as if you're ready to let it shine." My breath caught in my throat, his words pierced through me, exposing layers I had meticulously guarded. There it was, this gentle nudging that compelled me to confront my fears of inadequacy, notions of being forgotten, and the belief that perhaps it was time to step outside of the cocoon I had woven around myself. I felt emotions swirl, a blend of trepidation and elation, as he reached for my hand, an innocent gesture that connected us in a way far deeper than just two souls sharing dreams over coffee. It ignited something within me, this indescribable assurance that maybe I could contribute something beautiful to the world, that I had every right to occupy space. In that moment, as I sank deeper into his gaze, I realized I was in the midst of something so profoundly transformative, not solely because of him, but also because of my willingness to open up, to share the unfiltered truth of my heart. Even as I reminisce in my softly lit room now, with shadows dancing lightly across the walls, I know that everything shifted from that very first conversation. Milo not only encouraged me to explore my creativity but inspired a movement within me, lifting veils of doubt and replacing them with brushstrokes of hope and purpose. So here I lay, cherishing the beauty of life and love, knowing that vulnerability can lead to the most exquisite magic. Our journeys might intertwine in unexpected ways. But the truth remains, we are all just waiting for a little spark, for a connection that urges us to step fully into the light, reminding us that sometimes, the most beautiful transformations begin with a simple act of kindness.